Keith, your books are they published on your website?
Yeah, the details are on my website for the book, and yeah, it's been published.
Those books published as just ebooks, or can they get the actual hard copy? Do you have hard copies of those books?
Oh yeah, sell them direct from my website.
Okay, good.
Want me to post the URL in the room up on the blob at the bottom?
Yeah, you can pop it in here. I want. Do you have Tim? Do you have a website or what is the name? Type the name of your research group's website. That's a great website that's Relic's doing over there, so we can promote it.
Anything you guys want in the chat too, just type it in the bottom here, and I'll throw it in chat. No problem.
Yeah, we're Planet X Research.
Now Relic made a new tag. I saw he made a new tag. It was called what was it? Truth Seekers, Certified Truth Seekers, or something like that.
For Skype, or is that something different?
No. TimothyPaul. He's got a new tag. It's called Certified something. Or I wanted to throw that tag out there.
Yeah, Truth Seekers Network.
Light Descent. Okay.
Truth Seekers Network. TSN.
Off the Crossroads, right?
Caught at the Crossroads. You know the song? Caught at the Crossroads.
Okay.
I've just posted a URL to it as well. I mean, easy to click on that.
Okay, I think we're almost there. Just join us. I'm just going to mute for a sec.
Yeah, Causic, we're
It's times like these, time again.
Just want to welcome everybody back to NewRevRadio. You're listening to Caught at the Crossroads. We're here with Causic today and a couple special guests.
How you doing, Shebs?
Good.
Yeah, Shebs, you threw it out there to me. You said, Causic, anytime you want to get on the radio show, you just give me a yell, and I'll make some time. We'll block it off for you. So I'm holding you to it, and you did it, and I appreciate that. What we have tonight is we've got. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Now we were going to have another special guest. I can't tell you who it was, but we were going to talk with Keith Hunter. We've got Keith Hunter here today. And we're going to talk with him about his theory on what he calls music of the spheres. Very interesting, very fascinating theory that Keith Hunter has with this idea that there's the things that are happening in our galaxy. He has a lot of great information on his theory as to what these things that are happening now on our Earth and how they came about. He calls it music of the spheres, and I really have always wanted to interview him on this. I don't know, kind of give him enough time to really go through just that aspect. And so we got him here today. We're going to be able to do that. We also got TimothyPaul in here. And Timothy is part of a research group where the other day Keith and I were on his radio show that they had, and they were talking about this recent solar event that took place that they called the Magnetopause reversal. And they went through 100 points, a whole bunch of information, a lot of research they did over the last couple of weeks on that event. And I thought it was very fascinating, and we joined in with them. And we spent some time talking with them on their radio show. So today, when we had our secret guest that couldn't make it, first person I thought about was TimothyPaul, and later on, Relic and possibly the rest of his panel might be able to call in. And then there's a guy out there, his name's Suspicious Observer. He coined the phrase, actually. It's not a scientific phrase, but he coined it and got a lot of hits. His name is Suspicious Observer. I'm going to check out his website. How you doing, Keith?
Not too bad.
Keith, you're over there in the UK across the Great Pond, and you've been doing a lot of research on this music of the spheres. You're a published author. You've got a couple of books. What are the names? What's the name of your books on these topics?
It's only one book. I think there's a bit of feedback there. Somebody needs to mute the mic.
Yeah, we're getting feedback from NewRevRadio over there, Shevs. Just letting you know that.
Yeah, I just got it. Sorry.
What's the name of that book, Keith?
Yeah, the book is called The Lost Age of High Knowledge. It's only one book. I've not got multiple books, but it took me about 12 years to write that one, so well worth the time.
Keith, I know you've got that book out there. It's a published book, and we can find that on your website. We're going to talk a little bit about what's in that book today, but also you're also doing a bunch of documentaries. You've got a YouTube page. I've followed you. You're a good friend of mine. I think that you're a consummate researcher, a professional, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show today for sure. I know that you've recently been looking at these events that are taking place as well with the Magnetopause reversal, and I know you're looking heavy into things like HAARP and how the music of the spheres play into some of this man-made technology that they're using here on the planet. So I thought it would be pretty good to have you come in and let's talk a little bit about what in fact is music of the spheres. I mean, can you just tell me what does that mean?
Well, basically, it's the term that is ascribed to the ancients, and it has a certain tie to astrology, if you will. The basic, principles of astrology is that the patterns of the planets and the sun and the moon relative to the Earth can affect changes on the Earth. Now, I know some people at least have gone into the personality, of people, but what I've looked pretty much exclusively at is how earthquakes are caused, because this is one of the key things that the ancients say, that when the planets are in certain patterns in the sky, especially conjunctions, they seem to relate these to great earth changes. But certain offset patterns, the astrologers will talk, in depth about the technicalities of it, but the basic principle is that certain arrangements in the sky can trigger earthquakes at targeted places on the Earth. And this is something I looked into to see if I could come up with the science behind it, the real physics behind it, and not just in a speculative, well, not a speculative, but a kind of a statistical sense, if you will. Because what I was essentially looking at in terms of focusing upon this was the numerological systems that we use to actually describe the heavens. We'll be familiar with like the basic Sumerian and the Babylonian system, their base 60 system, with
right.
degrees, minutes and seconds of arc and so forth. And we might also be familiar with some of the ancient calendar systems such as the Maya or the Aztecs, and what appear to be odd values and time cycles built in. Like the long count calendar has as a series of values. It's 1 day, 20 days, 360 days, 7,200, and then 144,000 days. And so I was looking at the numerological systems here to see if there was a real underlying physics behind this, and that these were not just abstract time cycles, and that the way in which we can model the heavens really does allow us to make that critical breakthrough to figure out and even forecast correctly earthquakes upon the Earth based upon the positions of the major celestial bodies
All right,
relative.
good. So what you're saying is that music of the spheres primarily is you're looking at conjunctions and you're looking at alignments and that kind of thing, and you're comparing that. Somehow you see that there is evidence that those alignments, those conjunctions that you're talking about are causing actual seismic activity on our planet. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, I would say that the positions of the planets are triggering earthquakes very precisely in a very exacting way, and that you can model this with extreme precision. And that this is a high.
Do you have some kind of an example? Can you give us like one example that you've looked at, maybe that you mapped it all out? And
I can give you the best example going, and this is the Japanese earthquake, March the 11th last year. And one of the reasons why it's called the music of the spheres is because one of the key characteristics of music is resonance. And people will have heard that term, especially by looking at physical structures like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, and how you can have a resonant destruction, if you will, of various objects if they're not built right, because incoming waves of energy effectively can cause them to shake themselves to a failure point. Now, one of the basic things about resonance is this. If you've got a physical object, say, of certain dimensions, and we have an external waveform impinge upon that object, it hits it. And we're familiar with waves in terms of peaks and troughs, almost like sea waves, if you will, yeah? The wavelength is the distance between peak to peak or trough to trough, if you will, yes? So if you have an object of certain dimensions and a waveform hits it, if the wavelength, right, of that waveform fits in harmoniously into the dimensions of the target object, what ends up happening is the wave becomes trapped and internally reflects back inside the object to set up a frozen wave pattern, which is what we call a standing wave pattern, right? And when that happens,
right, there's a lot of research right now. Standing waves. even your friend Suspicious Observer has been talking about standing waves. Now, these standing waves, that's not caused by any kind of compression, is it? It's just vibration, just an absolute consistent vibration that's locked in a pattern, like you're saying, and it's hitting the Earth. Is that right?
Well, yeah, this is what I'm essentially building up to. If you get these standing wave patterns where you get a harmonic fit, for example, within a certain target object, then these standing wave patterns, if the power of the waveform is enough, they essentially cause the object to go into a state of heightened agitation. And if it's great enough, the object will literally break apart. It will fail. And this is what we can look at in terms of physical structures and so forth. Now, going back to the Japanese earthquake then, and this is how to correctly model this stuff, because it is very exacting. When we look at the earthquake databases, we've got a few. We've got some. The USGS does one. Australia does one. There's many different places do one, and they register these earthquakes with exceptional precision. They give you the timing of the earthquakes, the precise day, and we get the hours, minutes, and seconds, right, of day, right when they hit. Now, the Japanese earthquake, then, the one that caused this disaster, especially with a nuclear event at Fukushima, that event in the Australian database, March the 11th, 2011, was 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 24 seconds. With that precise value, you can put that into an astronomical package and work out very exactingly where all the major bodies are relative to the Earth. And what you will find is the following. If you draw a straight line between the center of the Earth and the center of the Sun, right, at that precise universal time, it will cross through the surface of the Earth and give you a precise latitude and longitude point, right? If you then take the epicenter of the earthquake, where you've got the latitude and longitude of that, right, you've got 2 points here. If you then use a great circle calculator to work out the arc length mapped over the surface of the Earth, right, the surface of an ellipsoid model using our most advanced system, the WGS84 system, you work out the arc length there. That arc length connecting the epicenter to the ground position of the Sun fits almost dead on, right, 6 times into the equatorial circumference of the Earth. This is a 6-to-1 harmonic fit, a beautiful fit. And I can tell you that the accuracy on this, the error rate, is something like 260 feet, right, in terms of, if you were to take what is the equatorial circumference of the Earth and divide that by 6, and then you were to take and compare it to that arc length as specified there, the error rate discrepancy is just a few hundred feet. But just to be very clear on this, because the Earth's rotating on its axis, right, the Sun ground position, that where it pierces through the Earth's, the straight line, that is flying over the Earth. It's changing about 1,500 feet every second. So when I'm telling you that there's only an error rate of about 300 feet, what I'm trying to ram home the point is that earthquake occurred with split-second timing based
so
on
you're
a
saying
very
basically
exacting...
what you're talking about is laser-focused precision. I mean, you're talking about a wave that hit the Earth very precisely. Now, this to me, it sounds like exactly what's happening. Why aren't there the scientific community? Why isn't anybody else talking about this, Keith? Because it seems to me like what you're saying is summing it right up, and you can prove this. I mean, it's an absolute fact as far as I'm concerned. Why isn't the scientific community talking about this?
Well, the issue essentially is one of what are the implications of discussing this? Well, first of all, you would have to admit, right, that the music of the spheres, what the ancients were talking about, all their texts, when they're trying to tell us the positions of the planets, trigger earthquakes and various geological activity, you'd have to concede that these ancients were not stupid people, that there was a science that they knew about going backwards, and that it has been lost in time, if you will, but especially over the last several centuries with this heightened materialism and, the whole positivist scientific...
So, right. You say, because right now, conventional wisdom, supposed wisdom, quote, is telling us, hey, when ancient people were dumber than we are, they were not as smart as we are. They were living in clay huts and grass huts and in caves and that kind of thing, and they were pounding out their grain with rocks and that kind of stuff. What you're saying, though, Keith, is that obviously that whole conventional idea is not true, because these people in ancient times, hundreds or thousands of years ago and so on, these people had this kind of knowledge, things that we don't even have. Even the people in the scientific community are using technology, this supposed technology, where you use satellites and that kind of stuff, and going to school and universities to learn exactly what they're being told. So the reason that they're not catching it is because we're kind of been locked down in a way. We've lost our ancient knowledge. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is it's a question of suppressed science and even suppressed history. If you trace this thing back to its ultimate conclusion, and you look at many of the texts that we have, the ancient writings, you will then say to yourself, well, several thousands of years backwards, going backwards in time, you'll be saying to yourself, well, you're right, on the outward side, societies were very primitive. But if you trace them backwards, you'll say, well, you're looking at the evidence that a massive geophysical event occurred sometime on the order of about 12,000 years ago, and that this event involved these special patterns and this kind of science which would have modeled them correctly. And we're talking about very accurate conjunctions which would have triggered a destabilization of the Earth, and that this brought such a high civilization to its knees. Now, this is something that is very much suppressed in terms of what is taught even in basic schools. But you will also find that the military forces of various countries, especially over the last 100 years ago, they have rediscovered this science. They've even weaponized it. It is used, even nuclear weapons, for example, are devices that interact with the same physical mechanism that triggers earthquakes naturally. And they are devices which incite the actual explosion itself. They create it. You've also got the positioning of various covert bases, such as at Menwith Hill, Pine Gap, right? They are positioned according to this. In fact, I'll give you the classic example just to, again, this is something...
All right, I want you to go ahead and give me that example, and then I got Relic and Tim that want to pick your brain. They each have one question for you, so go ahead and finish that. Yeah, give me that explanation, and then we'll bring them and ask a question.
Just to give you an idea of the resonant implications. Remember I just said about the Japanese earthquake, that the wave pattern there fits in to the Earth's equatorial circumference, right? Yes. 6 times the arc length from the epicenter of the quake to the sun-ground position as modelled, very exactingly. So you've got a 1-to-6 ratio there. When the US set up their base, and this is in England actually, just a bit north of where I am, North Yorkshire, this was the Menwith Hill site, and it was set up around about the mid-50s when they built it. A massive spy complex, based on this echelon system with the big golf balls, if you will. Yes, the radomes. Well, they set up a similar facility in Pine Gap in the mid-60s, about 10 years later. And if you, again, just look, and anybody can verify this, you get the latitude, longitude coordinates of Pine Gap facility and Menwith Hill, and you work out over the ellipsoid Earth, the arc length there. The ratio between that arc length and the equatorial circumference of the Earth again is 3/8, right? It's such an exacting fractional value, and so these sites are connected energetically, and this is why they did a deal with the Australians to set up Pine Gap precisely where they did to achieve this ratio, and so you can get controlled effects that will be beneficial, again using the Earth as a medium to communicate through, just as you can see natural manifestations of these musical waves impinging upon the Earth, right, which can cause destructive effects. So there's this science relates not only just to earthquake science as well, but also it's a science which is practically used by military forces to either communicate covertly or even, and this is where things can get very advanced, and you can even transport objects, because you're talking about portal sites on the Earth to transmit instantaneously material or personnel between sites. This gets into some very esoteric stuff though, and that ties into the mechanism of earthquakes. This is discussed a lot in my book, and it's difficult for me to explain this briefly.
Well, it's very fascinating. I'll tell you what, absolutely fascinating. I believe everything that you're saying. I've talked to you quite a bit. I've listened to you quite a bit. I've even gone into your website and looked at all your stuff there. You and I have talked on Skype quite a bit. But I've got a couple of questions for you from the rest of the panel. I've got Relic here. He wants to chime in and ask you a question. And so, Relic, Relic is a member of the Planet X research group, and he has done a lot of research into this magnetopause reversal kind of a thing there. So he wants to ask a question. Tim Paul is also part of that. He was that radio show that me and Keith went on, talked about the same thing, and he's part of that research group as well. Timothy Paul, you have a question for Keith. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Keith? Got a question for you.
Tim, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, Tim might not be right there. He might have his microphone muted. I'm not sure. Relic, are you there? Do you have a question for Keith?
Yeah, are you guys picking me up?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry I came into the show a little late. This was kind of short notice, but I'm here nonetheless. And I caught a little bit of what you said when I first came in, Keith. And I've been wanting to learn more about your music of the spheres theory. And I just wanted to quickly ask you, well, first of all, I do agree with you that the Mayans knew of this way before science, has picked up on it. Now, that being said, do you think that this could have something to do with what we talked about yesterday with, for lack of a better term, we've kind of coined it, cosmic communication between celestial bodies and the event that we saw with the magnetosphere? Do you think this could have been something from deep space, or do you think this is something closer to home, dealing with your theory and resonance and that sort of thing? And I'll just let you take it from there.
Well, actually, we're hoping that Billy'd be on, Billy Hayes, because I was going to ask him a few things about the HAARP facility. I mean, in terms of the magnetosphere reversing, I think the question is what kind of power is involved in that, and what kind of on-the-ground, essentially covert facilities do we have, and could they possibly interact with it? I know that when it comes to on-the-ground station, I was just actually reviewing this book, Angels Don't Play This HAARP. It's a book I hadn't read for a while. I had to dig it out, because there was a very interesting reference to a book called The Lost Millennium. And they were, again, I think it was written like a fictional book, but they were really exploring the science behind it, and about how you interfering with the ionosphere can short circuit the planet, if you will, electrically speaking. From an electrician's point of view, they often speak about the Earth as like a giant capacitor, if you will, and that you can tap into the effects in a way which is a resonant, destructive effect, a runaway effect. This is one of the key words here, because some of the things that mentioned about HAARP is that Edward Teller was even involved in the project, and that in stimulating the ionosphere with the radio frequency waves, they were looking to cause a runaway effect. And it's because of the teleconnection that I was wondering whether or not they were essentially trying to mimic the kind of processes that go on with nuclear weapons when you implode the plutonium core. That kind of, again, the chain reaction and the runaway effect there. I was wondering whether or not they were attempting with HAARP, for example, to engineer some kind of effect like that in the atmosphere, again, to achieve various ends. And it's a question of, if we've got something on the ground, man-made, to what extent are we capable of really screwing up the planet? And I would imagine it had to be some kind of resonance thing. And this is one of the things when it comes to nuclear weapons. They tap into the same planetary patterns as natural earthquakes. In fact, I evaluate in my book about 14 or 15 different nuclear weapons, their signatures, and look at the celestial patterns relative to them. And I also evaluate some earthquakes. And what you find when you compare earthquakes to nuclear weapons is that the arc length, the harmonic ratios that you have, and the arc lengths map onto the surface of the Earth, they're very much interchangeable. And for me, a nuclear weapon, when you actually trigger the device, you trigger the implosion of the device, you are essentially sounding out a certain musical signature, which at that moment captures celestial forces which essentially harmonically converge on your device. And this is why triggering the device at the right time and at the right location on the Earth is critical to engineering the nuclear explosion. The nuclear explosion does not result from the, quote, inherent power of the device. Rather, what you are doing is tapping into a greater reserve of power, and it is the destruction of the nuclear weapon itself by external forces which results in the massive outward explosion. And so this idea of could we have man-made equipment on the Earth, arrays of aerials, which could interfere with the Earth on a global scale, if we have such a network, could they have done something which may have temporarily, really through a resonant effect, caused the Earth to shift and switch?
That's right.
That's
well,
a possibility.
So what you're talking about basically is you're talking about reverberation, are you not? You're talking about the ability to use these very, very precise waves that happen naturally during things like conjunctions and alignments and that kind of thing, where they know those alignments are happening, they know the principle, and then they can set that up in advance for when they're looking at potential energy and seismic activity in certain areas of the world, when they're monitoring that kind of thing, and they know these alignments are about to happen, the music of the spheres and all that kind of thing. So what happens is they prepare in advance to use, either help to make it happen or to maybe even soften it up. Is that
well, if I might just say this much, because, as I said, this is very speculative to think that it was man-made devices which did cause the event. The only thing I would say is, from what I gather, and again, I think Relic will know more about this, and Tim, if we've got this data being taken down from the websites, right, for the event, and this appears to be what you were discussing, I think, previously, this to me indicates that they kind of suspect, or strongly suspect, they know what caused it. And if it's something that was man-made, that's a possibility. Again, we'd have to be speculating about the secret covert world and exactly what capabilities they have. And it's very difficult to really say for certain that it was man-made cause. It could be entirely natural, but still have been forecast correctly. And this is the thing about earthquakes. They are entirely natural events, and you can forecast them very accurately, even a few years in advance, nailing the latitude and longitude coordinates globally to an error rate of maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and saying the time of day to within 2 or 3 seconds of a day when it will occur. And this is the accurate. And the reason why you have that accuracy is because we have such accurate models for actually modeling the celestial objects like the sun and the moon and the other planets, and they trigger these earthquakes.
That's right.
Very advanced knowledge.
A lot of evidence. Matter of fact, for a long time, we've got a lot of trillions of dollars worth of instrumentation that they put in space. We know exactly where every planet is and where they are at every moment for a long time. But Timothy Allen or Timothy Paul, you've got something you want to ask him to chime in on this. What can you tell? What can you support? What Keith is saying? Do you have something you could add?
Yeah, let me make sure my mic's working first there. Can you guys hear me okay?
I think, Tim, your mic might be, you're talking in the chat room here on the conference call, but I don't hear you on the microphone. So, Relic, I don't know if there's some technical difficulty there, but let's get back to what we were talking about, though. You're saying basically that they're not telling us. Ancient societies have looked at this stuff, even before we had all this technology, that they mapped it out, and for somehow or another, we've lost it over the generations, whether it was caused by the machine that developed, or whatever the case may be, or we just have lost the education and the wisdom of our ancients. It seems like we're not being taught this in school. We're not even in colleges. The scientists are talking about this. We've got some old timers in my group that are lettered scientists, and we have some newer scientists that are in our group. And when they talk, it's like a world of discovery. Even within just a couple of generations, how they've watered down the information. So I totally agree with you. I think that they have definitely been scrubbing ancient wisdom from us. But I don't know if we got Tim back. He had some. I wanted to ask him what he could offer to what Keith is saying here. I may be muted on Skype. It's all fine here. Tim, have you gotten your microphone fixed?
Everything's okay here. I don't know if you can hear me on Skype.
I don't think so.
Well, if I might just follow up on a little point there, Causic,
regarding
what we're saying about the prediction. I mean, this is something that was, you may have heard or even seen a video produced by Dutch Sins talking about it. The March for an earthquake simulation on March the 20th for a 7.9 earthquake. I think Tim's got his
Yeah, can you
mic on. Yeah.
can you hear me
a little
now?
bit of there you go. Tim's back. He's right there. But let me just say, just before I bring Tim in, Keith, you're 100% correct. Back on February 11th, we started talking about this. We started telling you, hey, listen, there's a program put in place, a drill. Every time that they run a false flag, every time that they do something like this, they always start out with what we call a dry run. And on February 11th, they announced that they were going to run the Emergency Management Agency down there in Mexico. They announced that they were going to run a drill. And you're exactly right. In the very same area where on the 20th of March, in that very city, they were going to have between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock their time, they were going to have a drill simulating a 7.9 earthquake. It's all over the place. It's an absolute fact. And guess what? The earthquake, when did it happen? It was like something like 12:02. So during the exact same time. I mean, that's something we just can't blow off, can we?
And the earthquake was, well, I'm going by universal time because it's the one I use. I've done an analysis of it, 18 hours, 2 minutes and 48 seconds, and it was March the 20th. And as I said, that's universal time. Local time in Mexico, there might be 5 or 6 hours behind that. So you're looking at roughly about the exact same time they were doing the drill. So this just goes to show
within 45 minutes of exactly the same time.
This just goes to show you the key point I'm making. They knew that there would be a natural event occurring. The configurations of the planets would trigger this earthquake, and they would have nailed the precise location. They knew exactly when it was going to hit, but they dare not reveal how they know this. To open up on this science opens up a massive can of worms, so they dare not reveal it. So they have a drill, just a drill, because obviously if it is as big and as destructive to the civil population, they do need to be there. They need to be prepared. So they just have a drill. Oh, what a coincidence. The earthquake occurred and we just happened to be ready for it. But this just goes to show you that there's correct forecasting.
Yeah. So what they're really doing, what you're saying, Keith, is that they're taking natural events because they're very aware of all the ancient wisdom that they're not telling the general public. They know about these conjunctions. They know about the music of the spheres. They know about these alignments. And then they're taking them and they're saying, okay, we're gonna set this stuff up in advance because we know where this is going to happen exactly. And so they're putting this false flag of sorts together. Now, do you think that they ran those drills and put those emergency people in place and had that all there at that time to make it worse or to make it better? Do you have
Well, I think that from a basic standpoint, they were there to essentially help people, if you will. But basically, the government, obviously, they have to deal with civil emergencies. If you have suddenly lots of people nearby cities, thousands or tens of thousands or whatever, of people that haven't got power, if power lines get taken down, the physical infrastructure, they've obviously got to deal with that as a government, to keep the country functioning. Any country would have to deal with these national emergencies. So I just think, personally speaking, I think they correctly had forecast that there was going to be a natural disaster. They knew the exact time, they knew the exact location, they knew when it would occur, and so they prepared this drill just to be ready to try to deal with the civil emergency to the level that, they thought. And I just think it was so incredible that the initial reports were giving this as a magnitude 7.9, and I did screen prints of the Australian database, their earthquake database. Right. They initially gave it as a 7.9, and that's the exact value they were given in the distribution literature, which was printed weeks before for the earthquake itself. And so that just absolutely nails it. So
nails it. It was actually February 11th. They put those flyers out everywhere, and they set the whole thing up. There was an entire, like I say, the Emergency Management Agency. They set the whole thing up. It's an absolute fact. But let me ask you this now. TimothyPaul, what can you add to this? Do you think that this is that this was a false flag, that they in some way, or do you think that it was just like what Keith is saying, where they were looking at these facts, they could pinpoint that location, and then they were coming in there with emergency agencies to help in case there had been major death loss and that kind of stuff? What's your point? What can you add, Tim?
Thanks for letting me on today, Causic. I like to.
Absolutely, no problem, Tim. When we saw you over there on that radio show, when you guys were talking about the Magnetopause reversal, and I sat there and I listened for a couple of hours, and I listened to everything that you guys had to say. I said, you know what, these guys are fascinating. They've done the research on this particular topic, And I think it's kind of amazing, actually, if you look at this whole thing, how all these things are transpiring right about the same time that people like Lucas and John Moore and even Terrell are talking about the 180-day cycle. We'll get into that a little bit later. But Tim, what do you think happened over there? Was it a false flag, or was it them just helping this along or hurting it in some way?
Let me get back to what Keith was talking about there in the very beginning, where he was talking about the planets setting up resonance when they're in conjunction with one another. That's what you was talking, Keith, right? When they get in conjunction with one another, they're in total synchronization, frequency-wise, because I believe each planet has its own frequency, and we're all in a melting pot out here, and each planet sets up its own its own particular signature in space and time. So when these planets are in conjunction with one another, they set up for lack of a better term, a conduit between each other, as per each one of their own particular frequencies that match each other. Do you believe, Keith, that we can control the standing wave ratio between that conduit, say it like a radio wave between the planets? Do you think that a standing wave sets up, and that we can control that standing wave here on Earth to create earthquakes? Do you understand where I'm going with that?
Well, this is the thing. What you have as scientists, they are able to take advantage of celestial configurations, not necessarily conjunctions. Conjunctions, actually, when you look at the ancient texts, they talk about major conjunctions of an exceptionally accurate nature. These are the events which cause massive global destabilization. We're talking the Earth's axis shifting many, many degrees. We are talking about floods and destruction via fire and water, according to people like Berossus, the 4th century guy. The vast majority of earthquakes that occur today, they do not involve conjunctions. They involve very precise, subtle patterns. Usually the sun and the moon are major factors, but you also get other planets as well. Now, with regards to, we talk about them stimulating these, even a nuclear weapon, you have to basically position that at a certain place on the Earth, wait literally for the Earth to rotate around, so the point itself, where the device is, say if you're doing a test, is moving around, moving with the Earth, which is the biggest movement. And you've also got, if you model the other planets, they'll all be like dot-like positions, longitude and latitude, over the surface of the ellipsoid Earth, and they again will be subtly moving themselves, and you wait for the precise ratio patterns to connect up where your device is and the ground positions, and then you trigger your device, because your device does not have the inherent power to cause a massive outward nuclear explosion. You're basically making a small little action which taps into a massive force. It's a bit like having a great big massive boulder and just having it literally propped up by a little stick, right, if you will. You, the operator, can just move that stick out of the way, and you'll expend a little bit of energy to do that. But when you do, the boulder just drops, and the force and power of that drop there vastly exceeds the input of energy from you, the operator, to just knock that stick.
So what you're saying, Keith, you're saying that you're saying that they're not creating earthquakes. What they're doing is they're identifying areas of potential energy, and they're looking at the things that are going on in space all at the same time, when you know exactly that the conditions are correct, and they're helping this along a little bit. Is that what you're saying? What
I'm saying is, and this is the biggest thing, and when I've done interviews with Kerry at Project Camelot, she always asks me the same thing. The question is an event entirely natural, or is it artificial? Now, earthquakes have been happening since, proverbial year dot. They happen all the time, right? And as events, they're pretty much very, very natural for the most part. Now, you can take technological devices, and a nuclear weapon is one example, and you can use it to interact with a pattern which ordinarily may not have produced an earthquake of any significance. I mean, an earthquake like 2.0 or whatever, you probably wouldn't even feel it, you know what I mean? The low-level stuff. So they will have taken a pattern which was resonantly significant, but not so much that it would cause a massive earthquake on its own. And they tapped into it with their device to draw off some of the energy that would manifest there naturally, right? Now, the reason why I am a bit wary of suggesting that some of these earthquakes, especially of high magnitudes, are artificially created is because we have to then look at the power involved in those earthquakes, and we have to look at a bit of a plausibility angle, if you will. I mean, just to give you an indication, the largest nuclear bomb that was ever set off, right, was the Soviet Union one in 1961, the Tsar bomber, which means king of bombs. And that was 58 megatons, right, 58 million tons of TNT. Now, the equivalent of that, I'll just give you, the Richter scale magnitude of 7.0 is for 32 megatons. Now, because it's an exponential scale, the Tsar bomber device would be very low, only just slightly beyond that, yeah? It wouldn't get well into the 7.0 scale. It would just slightly be above it. But if you looked, for example, at an earthquake that's 9.0, like the Japanese one, the magnitude in terms of TNT for that event is a 9.0. It's 32,000 megatons. Now, if you think about the Tsar bomber, 58 megatons versus 32,000, am I going to think that that earthquake in Japan was artificially created? I think the odds are very much against it. It's very unlikely. Again, that is just my opinion. But I think that a lot of these high magnitude earthquakes, I'd be very surprised if they really were being triggered artificially, because they seem to be so dangerous to even be doing that. Because you'd have to really know the power of the celestial configurations, because I sense that you're playing a certain game here, you're playing the odds. You're triggering or tapping into an energy reserve that perhaps you might have misjudged its power. And if you don't control it right, then your earthquake could go off the scale. You could regionally really destroy an entire area. Not just, and I'd mean it well beyond, a normal 9.0 earthquake. You could maybe possibly a country. And this is why I do wonder about the ability to control it, and just exactly to what capabilities they are. But I just tend to suspect that many of these very high magnitude earthquakes are likely to be natural, but saying that, correctly forecast, right? Just like the one in Mexico. Yeah. I mean, originally a 7.9, well, an 8.0 earthquake is about 1,000 megatons, right? So if it's just slightly beneath that, you can see where we're going here.
Yes.
These are the power of these events, and I just tend to suspect that it's unlikely that these events, these high magnitude ones, are really, artificially stimulated. That's just my opinion, though. But right. I do think that they are correctly forecast, and that people are obviously manipulating these events. People would protect their own assets if they knew an earthquake were going to occur in a certain area. You'd either, basically, for financial reasons, you might want to pull out assets or make stock market bets, favourable to you, or get rid of things that might end up crashing. It's like the airline industry on 9/11 and the betting that went on against that. So I think that people who have the power to forecast this stuff will make moves to their advantage, but they'll certainly not tell the general populace. They'll let them. That's right. They certainly won't.
There's a lot of evidence that they haven't in the past, not just with the quake that happened in Mexico recently, but also in the past. There's been people talking about things like when they had the quake in Fukushima, when Japan, actually the whole continent might have actually moved 12 feet or so to the east, that caused that giant tsunami. And then there's other reasons to believe that there could be false flags that took place there. Not just in that event, but multiple events. It's really good stuff. I got Relic over here. He wants to add a statement to what you're saying. Relic, what do you have to say about what Keith is talking about?
I'm listening to all this, and this is very thought-provoking, and I'm sitting here digesting all this, and let me say that, besides my interest in deep space, I come from a very educated electronics background. So, I tend to look at a lot of things in terms of electronic theory and the laws that it must obey. So, when we talk about things like HAARP, I see HAARP as not only a transmitter made by man, but also a receiver. And, a lot of people know that, current travels from negative to positive, the Earth being ground. And, so, I'm thinking what Keith said, and I'm thinking about what Keith said, and if I interpreted him correctly, it's not necessarily man that's creating these megaquakes, but we understand what's going on with, with this whole resonance and the music of the spheres thing, that we know how to tip the needle just enough to influence events. Now, saying that, we were also earlier, you guys were talking about preparedness drills, and I'm just wondering, with these tools that we know the military has, and the esoteric science things that you were getting into, can they use these tools to say, okay, we know this is coming, we need to prepare this area? Is this giving them the data beforehand to say, okay, we know an earthquake's going to occur here, based on the resonances that we're seeing, using HAARP, maybe not as a transmitter, but as a receiver. And, then you come to the question, does man create these, or are we trying to prevent them? That's just what I wanted to throw in there. It raises a lot of other questions. You answer one question in science, and then it opens up so many other doors. But,
absolutely. But you're 100% correct, and you're right. One question begets two, and so on and so forth, and that is the problem with the research. We're going to answer some of these questions today. Hopefully, it's very interesting. We're talking with Keith Hunter. We're talking with TimothyPaul, and we're talking with Relic. We're talking about the music of the spheres, and then later on, we're going to talk about this magnetopause reversal that Relic and Tim and a few others in their research group were on the radio show, and we were there with them, and there was very, very good information. We're going to bring that up a little bit later. Let me put out the call information. If you want to call in and ask these guys a question, you can just add to Skype, NewRevRadio Studio on Skype. It's a free call, or you can call the phone number in directly and just use your regular phone. It's 323-319-6470. It's 323-319-6470. We're going to take a little break. We'll be back here in about 2 minutes and two, and we're going to get back into this topic on music of the spheres and the magnetopause reversal. We'll see you guys in a few minutes.
Station's dropped, right? Okay, you got me by surprise on that break.
Okay, yeah, I want to throw that out there. I need to take a moment because I need to go just do one thing. I'll be back in less than 2 minutes. Okay,
yeah,
so
no
you
problem.
got some music background? Okay, I'll be right back.
Same here. I'm going to go get some coffee. But regarding the magnetosphere, if you got people in chat, when we start talking about it, New Rev, that video has been seen by very few, and it's brand new data that was put out this week. And
okay. Yeah, I'll put it up, and maybe I'll put it up for video of the week or something too.
Yeah, we'll throw it out there. We'll put it on the URL. But let me tell you something, guys. I'm catching all kind of heat from Terrell and Terrell's group. Not from Terrell, but from Terrell's group. Like Deacon defriended me from Skype, and he's not. Now I'm getting all kind of hell from other radio shows. They're saying it because I had.
Yeah, you know what? They just told me I don't even want to.
Yeah, we'll get into it later. I'm just saying, we're catching a lot of heat. The point is, we're not talking about Terrell. This isn't a Terrell bashing thing. Yeah. We're talking about the science. So let's just move forward. But
let it roll over shoulders, man. Don't worry about what the people
well,
say.
I'm on. I'm on their shows as well, and I'm on these shows as well. But I wanted to bring you guys in here because I thought that what you were doing there the other day with that radio show, I thought that was really good stuff. And I wanted to bring you in here in the last minute. So give me a few minutes. I'll be right back. How long we got, Rev?
5 minutes around.
All right, right back.
Yeah, I'd like to hook up with Keith again about his theories there, too, if we get a chance to do that, too. Yeah, I think I can put everything in a very simple term for people that what we're talking about is going right over the top of their head. Relic, did you put that new video up?
Yeah, I put it in chat once. I'll do it again, though, for sure.
Cool, thanks. You got a good level on my audio now? I'm in the studio right now, so.
Yeah, you sound perfect.
Good deal. Appreciate it. Yeah, I produce the True Seekers Network. Relic and I put it together, so I do the production over at my studio here.
Ah, cool. Hey, I could link you. Like affiliate?
Sure. There's
Just-
a recent.
No, don't call Billy because his health is. He's not just his computer. He's coming online, but his audio is still out, and he's having some problems. I've been speaking to him on the phone, so we're going to hold off on Billy. We'll reschedule Billy. Unfortunately, Keith. I know. Keith's like, oh, gee. Yeah, but we'll have him back on.
No, I was just going to say actually we talked about videos. I did a really good video on fractional reserve lending, and nobody's even watching it. I feel gutted.
You were making another documentary. You and I were talking on the phone, and you were saying that you were putting up a video, and I said you were talking about the Carrington event and other events that took place, like the one in Canada where we had the power outage there. And I was talking to you about these conjunctions and the music of the spheres, these alignments that take place where the sun aligns with other planets other than the Earth. And there's a lot of large body of evidence where you've seen these kinds of events happen facing those planets. Have you looked into that?
Well, yeah, this is what that X5 flare thing that occurred on March the 7th, I think it was. I've posted that on Image Check. You might have seen that. This is twin conjunctions centered on the sun. The Earth's involved in one of the sets, but I think the other's just purely Venus and Mars. So the sun is the target body. And for me, when you have massive solar flares and eruptions like that, it's like the equivalent of the effect of when the sun itself is hit with an earthquake triggered by its interaction with the other planets. Because matter is exchanged between all planets. All planets will have earthquakes, all moons, and the sun. They're all shifting it around due to the various configurations.
I agree.
Yeah. Now they're telling us, that there's earthquakes on the moon and there's earthquakes going on in other planets and that kind of stuff. They're hard-boiling all this stuff.
There should be earthquakes everywhere.
Yeah. Well, now they're telling us it is, so they haven't been in the past. They've been telling us that the moon doesn't have a core, so it doesn't have seismic activity. So, anyway.
All bodies out there can have earthquakes if you relate it to the music of the spirits with the resonance and all that stuff. What Keith is talking about here.
Outside forces, absolutely. Outside forces, not just caused by Newtonian cosmology. You have to look at other things like resonance frequency. That's plasma cosmology. That's not Newtonian cosmology. And that's why Keith is, what he's saying right now, I think, is nailing it. So your recent video, it didn't go over very well yet, Keith?
The fractional reserve lending video, I've only, like 1 week I've had, I don't know, about 188. Took ages to do that one as well. Brilliant lecture. I even had one person going to forum and told me it was too long and too boring. He seemed to think it was good, but it was just like, you know what I mean? It was like saying most people won't like it, even though it's good.
Well, I'll tell you, because that whole thing has been just talked to death and back also as well. But I'll tell you something else. I'm gonna get you to the point where you can tell, because you're so smart. You say things that the average person is just not hearing you. I'm gonna crunch you down so you can just throw it out there and just clean
going
point.
Live here.
Yep. Are we back?
All right, just 1 second. Join. As soon as you, yep, we're live.
Back on Caught at the Crossroads. We got Keith Hunter here. We've got TimothyPaul, and we've got Relic. Keith Hunter's been talking about the music of the spheres. He's done a lot of work in that area. He's done a lot of research. He's got a book out there he's published. He's got a website that you can go to, and I want to promote that website here in just a second. I got to go back up and scroll up. I wasn't prepared to grab that real quick. What is your website, Keith? How can we get to your book, and how can we purchase your book?
The website's called ancient-world-mysteries.com, and it's dashes between the words, so it's ancient-world-mysteries.com. I've posted it in it's in the chat room, I think, if you can copy and paste that into to the other room. But my book is detailed on the website, but there's many good essays on there, and there's also links to my YouTube channel. So there's a lot of good free information, and the main proofs about the validity of what we use as imperial measures, feet, inches, and how these units are tied in even to the natural frequencies of the planets, such as, for example, the Earth and its number of days per year we have there. In my book, I actually detail, I try to reconstruct what the original system of, or the original orbital periods of the planets within our solar system was when it was in a state of unusual harmony. So, for example, Mercury, I believe, had 90 days exactly, right? The Earth had 360 days, Venus 225, and the planet which was destroyed between Mars and Jupiter had 1440 days. And Ceres, which became the moon of that, which shifted, now 1680 days. And that was just interesting, that number 1440, because I know numerologically that's related to this concept of light and of Lucifer, and there's certain mythologies involved in that as being a body that was brought low. So there's interesting mythologies with that. And that interval as well, from a perspective of the music of the spheres, if you look at the work of Kepler, people often refer to that point as that, the devil's interval, right, because of a harmonic instability. This is just some of the research I've just briefly scanned regarding that. So there do seem to be massive destructive events, and this is what I think happened between the asteroid belt, or rather, between Mars and Jupiter. It was a large body that exploded there, and you can even look at the work of Van Flandern that there were multiple bodies. And you can
Van
look at the Kuiper
a whole lot of other people have said all throughout our ancient history, we've seen cataclysmic events that have happened not only here on Earth, but throughout our delicate clockworks we call our solar system. I want to urge people to go to Keith's website, because he's full of information. His website's full of information. I've been there myself, and you could spend days if you're looking at this kind of research and that kind of thing. And we've also got TimothyPaul here, and we've got Relic, and they have had a radio show just a couple of days ago where Keith Hunter and myself chimed in on the radio show. They've been looking at a lot of evidence about our magnetopause and how it was reversed for something that was going on right now. At that time, we were looking at the sun and then the Earth and then facing the Leo constellation, which is right in line with that window of time when a lot of people are talking about this thing, about the cycle of 188-day cycle. John Moore talked about it. Lucas talked about it. Terrell talked about it. A lot of people talking about it. And we saw a major earthquake that took place in Mexico. We saw the swarm, quakes that took place, seismic activity that happened in the what we call the precursor. And then we saw them running drills even long beforehand, which lead us to believe that maybe they knew about this in advance. So we've got TimothyPaul, and Relic wants to chime in. He wants to talk about, because while we were on the break, we were talking amongst ourselves, and we were talking about there are quakes going on within our solar system. Our moon, there's indications now that our moon, there's scars there that show that there's been earthquakes of sorts going on there, and other planets as well. And then we talked about the difference between cosmologies, between Newtonian cosmology, which of course is the conventional method of thinking, and then there's this other idea of plasma cosmology, which includes things like resonation. What do you have to say about that, resonations and earthquakes in the solar system?
Yeah, I was, listening to you guys over break, and a lot of earthquakes are, a lot of scientists would blame it on volcanism, and they'll say that it only happens on planetary bodies that have cores. But then when you talk about other planetary bodies and moons, take our moon for example, they have seen recently that there are moonquakes, and okay. Well, then you scratch your head and say, but wait a minute, the moon has no volcanism and no core. So, and then, Keith's talking about, in our asteroid belt, we know now that there used to be a planet there. The models show that there should be a planet there, but all we have now is debris. Some think that was destroyed in a major collision, but if I understand Keith correctly, he's suggesting, if I understand him correctly, that it may not have necessarily been a collision, but enough resonance that it caused the object itself to resonate at such a frequency that it exploded.
That's fascinating. Keith, is that what you're saying? Keith, are you saying
that
this
is exactly, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I
saying
can
that was
totally.
a planetary,
I can
our Kepler belt, are you talking about the Kepler belt, or are you talking about the asteroid belt?
the asteroid belt, and
Asteroid belt
looking at it
was
that
at one
way,
time an actual planet that Keith is saying, based on the music of the spheres, resonated to the point where it exploded. Is that what you're saying, Keith?
That's exactly what I'm saying. If you look at the work of Ovenden, it was a scientist, this was the 1970s, he did calculations to work out that the body that must have existed between Mars and Jupiter would be a large body, Saturn-sized. Now, Saturn's about 92 Earth masses. Now, just to give you a little indication on how this figures into the mythology, you know when you get an eclipse, a solar eclipse, we're on the Earth and you see the disk of the moon cross over, and you get the halo effect right around the disk of the moon, yeah? It's called the corona, right? Now, the word corona means crown. Now, there's a story in mythology about a man called Phaeton, who basically, he goes to his father, who is the sun god, the sun. He goes to visit him at his palace, right? And he asks that he take command of his father's chariot of light for 1 day. And his father, he tries to talk him out of it, but he's made this oath. He's promised him he can have whatever he wants. And then when his son said, I want to take control of your chariot, he wanted to back out, but he couldn't. So he tries to give him all the advice. He says, steer a steady course, don't go too high, don't go too low. And then what he does, he gets him in the chariot, and then he rubs some protective ointment on his face, and he transfers the sun's light rays onto his head. He crowns his son, right? His successor for the day. And what happens is, he loses control of the chariot. The whole world's in turmoil. All the planets are agitated, all of the gods, if you will. And so one god, the earth goddess, makes a plea to Zeus to say, you need to sort this out. Now, Zeus is the planet Jupiter, right? And what Zeus does is he fires a thunderbolt directly at Phaeton to destroy him. And if you consider the story itself, right, what you've got is, if you're Jupiter and a body moves in between you and the sun, you're going to have the halo of the sun behind that body. The crown is right there. Phaeton is crowned by his father, the sun god, in the myth. And this is the point when Jupiter's thunderbolt. Now, the whole idea of earthquakes is that what the resonant patterns musically allow for is literally matter transfer between different bodies, but through a sort of subspace, right? It's not like matter is literally physically thrown from one body to another. It's where you have a localized withdrawal of matter just underneath the surface of one body, and the duration of the earthquake, which might last several dozen seconds, is the withdrawal of that matter from just under the surface of another body. And it's instantaneous localized emergence on another body, right? And so there's always going to be a pairing. And if you consider what's happening then with the planets, they're all exchanging matter dynamically between themselves due to their natural movements around. The resonant musical signatures create these essentially micro portals to allow matter to go from one body to another. And this is why all the planets will experience seismic activity in a very targeted way. But in extreme cases, when you get these very accurate conjunctions, like in the Phaeton story, the thunderbolt of Zeus is a massive injection of matter which destroys this body completely through a resonant destruction, which gives us the asteroid belt. So you see then these mythologies, there's a real physics and a science behind it. And the conjunctions are the extreme cases, but most earthquakes, as I say, even 9.0s, don't involve conjunctions, but a very subtle configuration pattern.
We know all throughout history that they had looked at the stars. They had kept track of these types of events that you're talking about. It sounds to me like a lot of anthropomorphized allegories where they've taken these things in space, like you're saying, with Jupiter being Zeus and shooting out a firebolt or a lightning bolt at another planet that was coming in and that kind of thing. And that very fascinating stuff. We see that all the time. The problem is that we're reading it wrong. I think the general society is reading it wrong when they look back at ancient, text, and they look back at ancient mythologies, and they look at the terminology in the Greeks when they talked about Zeus and Athens and all the gods, and you refer to them as being the planets. And that bridges exactly what what we think is that everything that's going on in space, we're doing here on the Earth. We're mimicking what's going on here on the Earth with things that have happened in space. And I'll tell you something. You made another fascinating point there, which is that resonation doesn't just hit one planet, but it hits one planet. There's a reverberation. It strengthens, and then it hits another planet. And now I understand what you're talking about when you talk about the music of the spheres, because it's not just one interaction between one planet and another, but one hits one and then builds up and hits another and so on. Fascinating stuff. Relic, you wanted to chime in.
I'm going to plug one tiny little fact that people may not know. There's a minor planet that's out in the asteroid belt named Ceres, Ceres, and they are now thinking that this is a remnant moon of this planet that is no longer, that has become what we know as the asteroid belt. So that's something that people can grasp and go out and look at now. It's almost perfectly spherical, and it is the thought of a lot of scientists now in the astronomy community that that is the moon that used to be orbiting that planet, which is now the asteroid belt. But we're going to try to have Keith on. We're going to have Keith on next Saturday on the Truth Seekers Research Network, and Causic, you're free to join, and anybody else. And we're going to go into this for 2 or 3 hours in more depth, and we're going to talk more about the reversal, more about resonance and the music of the spheres. Special guest Keith and anybody else who wants to join. But I think Tim has a lot of information that he can put out there to really simplify this for people who are out there scratching their heads right now, saying, I kind of understand this, but you guys are going a bit over our heads.
Well, I'll tell you what, Relic, you made a good point there, but let me go back again because you kind of brushed over that real quick. What's the name of your radio show there, the research group that you're talking about?
Truth Seekers Research Network.
And how do you find that?
Via our website, www.planetxresearch.org or planetxresearch.com, or you can join our Pal Talk chat room. It's under Education Other, and it's called Truth Seekers Research. And with that, I'd like to pass the mic to Tim.
Right. Well, let me just throw this out there that we just got a very gracious offer from the radio station owner here at NewRevRadio. They have between 11,000 with their affiliate program that they have going on, upwards of sometimes the potential the potential listeners go up to 25, 35,000. They're offering to have you allow them to simulcast your show, Relic, if you would give them permission to do that. Then I'll hope that Shebs and you can get together after the show and set that up so that you guys can simulcast on NewRevRadio as well. Is it okay with you?
Well, yeah, and I'd like to point out we made the TSR network. We don't consider it our show or Tim's show or Relic's show. This is a platform for everybody out there listening. This is not for mouthpiece radio guests and celebrity pundits. This is a platform for you, the independent researcher who don't have a voice and don't have a degree. This is your show, your platform. We're doing this for you.
Yeah, for the average person, for people who can't get this information anywhere else. You're not going to find this on mainstream, lamestream media. Absolutely, for sure. And what you guys are doing is great there. You're doing the research, and I appreciate that. Let me put out the information again. If you want to call in and ask Keith Hunter a question, or TimothyPaul or Relic on any of these subjects, right now you can call in at NewRevRadio Studio on Skype. It's a free call. Just download Skype and then just add NewRevRadio Studio as a contact and call in for free. Or you can call in with your regular phone at 323-319-6470. That's 319-6470. All right, guys, listen, I want to kind of change the pace a little bit. But, Tim, I think you had a wrap-up that you wanted to put on this. And then I want to spend some time, and I want to talk about, now that we're at the top of the hour here, I want to talk about this idea that you guys have been researching, this event that took place with this Magnetopause reversal, as it was put out by a suspicious, how do you say his name? Suspicious Observer. He put that out there on his YouTube channel. He's got a lot of people out there. And I think the guy's red as rain. So let's go ahead. Tim, do you have something to say to finish this up, and then we're going to move into your topic?
Well, I'd just like to compliment Keith on his research. It's very intriguing and it's very enlightening to us. What we basically do, I just like to say, on our show, we try to simplify things, break it down to its least common denominator, so the average audience can understand this. So we can carry this on at another time, because what we have to say would probably take a lot of time. But we appreciate you letting us on the show here. And if anybody has any questions or anything about communications, electronics, electrical fields, or anything like that, that's my expertise. And that's pretty much what I got to say right now about that topic. As far as Keith goes, Keith is a very well-disciplined researcher, and we love his research tremendously.
Yeah, Keith has a website. He's got a book out. He's published it. We're going to promote that again here by the end of the show. If you want to call in, we told you, call in now. But let's get into a little bit about this radio show. What made you guys decide to focus on and spend the weeks looking at this solar event? Which one of you guys want to jump up here, Tim or Relic, and tell me what drew your eye? What was the reason? What makes this particular event so abnormal that it caused you guys to do an entire radio show on it and 2 weeks worth of research since the event took place?
I would let Relic go ahead with that. It's more than 2 weeks research. We've been following this stuff for a long time. There's many parallel websites out here in the chat rooms that's been following us. We just took it our direction, and others taking it their direction. And go ahead, Relic. You can probably explain better than I can.
Well, I'll just put it into a nutshell because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But, like Tim said, we watch this stuff a lot. And when we seen what we saw on the 12th, yes, it made our jaw drop. But, then there was the discrepancy in the data, and we had trouble going back and looking at the data. Well, that's what made us do 2.5 weeks of research is I gave the radio station a video of some new data that was released just a few days ago. And once we reconstructed the entire event, looking at several different simulations, that's when, we literally got chills. It changed our lives. What we saw based on our backgrounds, I don't want to make it too technical, but and this may be for another time. We can touch upon it maybe lightly.
Relic, we got plenty of time. It's only 12 minutes after 4. We can go to 3. We can go to 5 o'clock. And Chevs, I think we can go a little long if we absolutely have to. Let's put this information out there. I think this information needs to get out there. And then the people that are listening right now are interested. We're getting all kind of questions. We're gonna take some callers a little bit later here. So don't worry about the time. Tell us exactly what happened. What changed your mind? What was the big deal? Why is this Magnetopause reversal such a big deal?
I'll be back in a moment too, by the way, guys. I'll be right back.
Because even though NASA says this happens all the time, and they have given a few reasons why, to us it is unprecedented. And to those who agree that the data is not bad data, that it is pristine data, when I just plugged in a link that everybody in the chat room may want to take a look at, especially the very last simulation. It's labeled.
Well, that link you posted is right here, just on the radio show. What we'll do is we'll have Chevs, if you guys want to. The Chevs over here at New Revolution Radio, they have a chat room built into the radio show. You guys can we'll take this, we'll throw it down in there. Come on into www.newrevradio.com. and take a look at these links, because this is what Relic's talking about, and you can get a visual of what he's saying. Go ahead, Relic.
And not to plug or publicize my YouTube channel, but just for those who cannot view it on either source, if you go to the Relic 1974's, that's my YouTube channel, you'll find it. It's labeled Long Awaited magnetosphere data from March 12th. So that's the video that will probably open a lot of people's eyes. And I think depending on people's backgrounds, everybody's going to see it in a different way. But the way we saw it with our backgrounds, it just totally blew us away. I mean, when we finally had all the data reconstructed, and this was data that was captured from and given to us from many different people, some who wished to remain anonymous. This is data that was captured during the event, and like we talked about yesterday, this wasn't data that we went back and got 2.5 weeks later when there was room for manipulation of data. No, this was data that was captured during the event. So
actually, what you guys did was you went back and painstakingly, because some of that data, because of some of the corruptness of that data that was put on those computer models, diagrams, etc. You guys painstakingly went around the world searching for sources where you could put that data back together inch by inch, minute by minute, and you were able to go back, and over a period of time, you were able to create an entire diagram, a computer diagram of the entire event. You said something about missing just a little bit of time, but you guys put the whole thing back together. It was painstaking research to be able to do that, and people came to you. People came to you that don't want you to tell who they are and that kind of thing, but they gave you that information, so they wanted to get it out as well. I want to say that it is interesting that at this particular time, when everybody's talking about these cycles that are taking place, these seismic cycles that are taking place, and Keith is talking about the music of the spheres, which obviously is about cycles, about conjunctions, about alignments, and that kind of thing, and that we're looking at now with this event that's taking place, along with John Moore and other people that like Lucas and Terrell are talking about this 180-day cycle. We see them hiding and covering up, the fact that they have this information. The governments are preparing for these 7.9s. They're downgrading, and one of the things about downgrading a seismic, event like an earthquake, going from 7.9 down to a 7.4, and then eventually ending up at a 7. From 7.9 to 7.6, eventually ending up at a 7.4. That is just unheard of, really.
It's a major magnitude change.
Well, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of times the difference in magnitude.
Right.
Isn't that right? Isn't that right?
Yeah. If I might, I can give you the figures on that. An 8.0 earthquake, just slightly above a 7.9. Well, obviously the number, but still. An 8.0 is 1 billion tons of TNT, which is 1,000 megatons. Yeah. Now a 7.5 is 160 million tons. There's as I say, it's a times 32 shift from every point. So 7.5 is 160 million tons. 8.0 is 1 billion tons of TNT. So that's like a half point there.
But just a half a point, you go up like now. Put that in layman's terms. I mean, how many Hiroshima nuclear bombs is that?
Hiroshima was only 15,000 tons, or 15 kilotons. A megaton is 1 million tons. It's practically off a scale, and multiples are immense. This is why high magnitude earthquakes totally dwarf nuclear weapons explosions in terms of the power. They say the largest nuclear weapons test we had officially on record is the Tsar bomber, which is just 58 megatons, 58 million tons. And an earthquake, of the equivalent, well, as I say, 7.0 earthquake is about 32 megatons. So Tsar bomber at 58 is above that slightly, but because it's an exponential scale, 7.5 on the Richter scale is 160 megatons. So against 58, it's a massive drop. It goes well above that even. This is why if you're talking about a drop from 8.0 to 7.5, you go from 1,000 megatons to 160 megatons. So you'd see like a sixth sort of a difference there.
And even when you're looking back at all the seismic monitors and like things like USGS and etc., you see that they don't make those kinds of major downgrades. When they downgrade, they do a 1 or 2 point, which is still very significant. To go from, and there's evidence to believe that for the first 3 minutes or so, that this was an 8.0 that was immediately dropped down to a 7.9, which is not abnormal. But from 7.9 then to 7.6 and now 7.4 just seems to be, in the scientific community, somewhat absurd. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Because it seems to me like it was just, they knew it was going to happen, and they had people in place during that very same time. And there's evidence to think that they might have actually used man-made technology, nudge technology, to actually dampen that quake. When we're talking about this 188-day cycle and all these other, what's your take on that, Relic?
Keith, I got a question for you. This is Tim. Is each unit of power on the earthquake scale there, is that squared, or what mathematical formula do they use for that?
Well, do you know, I've seen a few different ones. In my book, I cited a table that relates Richter scale magnitudes to TNT values, because TNT values, this is what we use as the standard for expressing the magnitude of the power of nuclear explosions. And I'm not using a formula. I'm just looking at this table I've got. I'm just because I cite it in my book. I've got a copy of the book open in front of me, and the listing is.
Right, it gives you a visual value of each unit there. That's a great graph that you have. I was just wondering if they use the square value per major unit of power release there.
Tim, you're getting some digital warble going on there. I don't know what it is, but Relic, you were going to chime in there. You wanted to ask one question before we moved on with this.
Yeah, I just wanted to, as we shift gears, we were talking about earthquakes and resonance, but as we shift gears into what happened on March 12th, comparing earthquakes and stuff of that and HAARP to what we seen when we finally got all of the reconstructed data from March 12th, comparing those two is like saying the earthquake was an M80 firecracker. And what we witnessed on March 12th was something unmeasurable, so unmeasurable and so profound, in our opinion, that a lot of us are scratching our heads saying, how on earth are we still here to talk about it?
That's
and
right.
I think Tim can, this is where I don't want to get too technical, and I know I will. It's just my nature. So I think Tim can maybe simplify for everybody that's saying what was so profound about March 12th.
Right.
You can either, Tim can simplify that now, and also I may encourage you to go back and listen to the 3-hour broadcast from yesterday, because
right. But I think that's what we're going to do, because I'll tell you, we're going to take the next half of this show, and we're going to go into this Magnetopause reversal solar event that took place. When the sun was behind us, and then the Earth, and then something out there in the Leo constellation or so, something hit us. We don't know what it was. Now, my scientists have a different point of view, and I'll bring it up, I guess, here, in a little while. But let's do this. Let's throw it out there. If you have questions for anybody on any of these topics, give a call in to, you can download Skype. It's a free phone call at NewRevRadio studio. Add to your contacts and call in for free. Or you can call in to the radio show with your regular phone at 323-319-6470. Let's take some time and let's start talking about this magnetopause reversal thing. I mean, first of all, we didn't get Suspicious Observer wasn't able to make it in. I did send him an email, but on such short notice, I'm really glad that you guys were able to join us just a few hours or an hour or so before the show, and then you guys came in. I'm glad to have you here. So let's talk about, what does this mean? What does the term mean? Magnetopause reversal. Where did that come from?
Let me make a quick comment about what we saw that Relic and I both were absolutely in awe over. We saw, where it came from we don't know, but what we saw was the most incredible energy flow that we've ever saw in our lifetimes. We saw a conduit of energy flow that was beyond comprehension power-wise. Good, Relic.
Are you there, Relic?
Yeah, I'm here. I had muted my mic to pass it on to Tim, but we saw such a large and concentrated and dense electron stream flow the opposite direction, pushing back the solar wind for 28 hours. 28 hours. Now, you couldn't even see the whole scope of this thing. I would imagine you would have to probably back out as far as much farther than the moon, maybe to the next planet out, to totally grasp how large this. I mean, to be honest, we've had to coin some pseudoscience terms for this. We're calling it, for lack of a better term, because there is no term, a temporal displacement wave or an opposing parallel anomaly. At this point, that's all we know to call it.
Can I ask you something, really? I'm just kind of throwing this in.
Sure.
I know we've been talking about the reversal, and obviously, we just mentioned possibilities of it man-made, and that, as I said, that's speculative, very much so. I would personally favour a celestial, event, and this is the thing. I look at the magnitudes of earthquakes pretty much off the scale compared to what man-made nuclear weapons do in terms of the patterns of the planet. And I just wondered, in terms of this flow rate, and again, I am no expert on the sun, could it have been, instead of another body, say, behind the Earth, doing something, maybe something happened with the sun itself to stop its solar wind, and maybe this affected all planets simultaneously, if you know what I mean. And it's a kind of a sucking reversal effect, if I might use that term. Is there any data along those lines, maybe?
Well, as a matter of fact, one of our researchers, Delta, in our room, just gave me last night 10 years of ghost data, everything from protons, electrons, resonance, X-ray, satellite environment, and it's going to take me at least a week or two to even put that data back together. So we are trying to go back and see, number one, has this happened in the past? And number two, where did this come from? Man-made? I would have to say absolutely not. This event made any weapon that we have on Earth look like a spark. It made it look like one of those firecrackers that you throw on the ground, those poppers, that you throw them down, they just pop and scare you. It made anything that we have man-made look that tiny.
I would like to say, in relative speaking with Keith, what he's been talking about harmonics, I think whatever was out there that produced this field stream of electrons or whatever they were. I'm not sure if they were electrons or what they were, but I believe that the sun set up a resonant frequency with this event that happened in the outer reaches of our galaxy. It set up a perfect harmony balance between whatever's out there and the sun, and communicated to this gigantic conduit. You can think of it as a water hose with water flowing through it, for lack of better explanation, of a massive amount of power transfer between the sun and whatever happened out there. That's the theory that we're going on right now.
Right, absolutely. You're saying, so what you're saying now is, you're saying that when you look at the diagrams, you see that the sun and the solar streams that come from these coronal holes, they move in kind of a pinwheel, kind of an arc, and then they hit the Earth in that respect. And so from the sun rotates at 27 days and 27 point some, the number there, and then the solar stream that comes out. Solar stream reaches all the way out to the furthest sides of our solar system, right? It creates something called a heliosphere. When we get back from this next break, we're going to get into this. We're talking with Keith Hunter. We're talking with TimothyPaul. We've got Relic on here, and we're going to be getting into this major space event that took place, this solar event, and what caused it. What happened? How did this happen? It was a major event. It's called the Magnetopause reversal, and we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. We're going to take a break right now. Call in at 323-319-6470 if you have a question for any one of the guests on the panel, or get on your Skype at NewRevRadio Studio and give a call in. Let's take a break, guys. We'll be back in a minute. You guys are caught at the crossroads.
thanks for having us on, guys. And it's really a miracle I could make it, because I tell you what, with all the research and then the show yesterday, we are all drained.
No, yeah, dude, I totally understand it. I've been, I took a nap a couple days ago. I literally was going to take a nap. It's like 3 p.m. I didn't wake up until almost the middle of the night.
Yeah. I took a 10-hour nap, man, and I tell you what, I am still half asleep.
Yeah.
You ain't the only one, brother.
And the info just keeps coming in, and it's like you want to research it, but you've got to pace yourself or you're just going to collapse.
I think we struck a nerve, too, out there, because we've been getting research from other people that we have no clue who they are, and it's amazing amount of information that we're getting in now.
Well, what we're doing right now is strategic, because this is pretty important. This isn't just one event, and I know you guys have issues with some of the commentary about things like the 180-day cycle, but
we listen to all theories, Causic.
Yeah,
we really
it's all relevant. It all gives us a clue or an insight.
It's all a piece. It's all a piece to the puzzle, man.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, listen, we put this together hodgepodge pretty quick, and we're seeing great numbers. I think the show's going well. I'm glad you guys showed up. I appreciate it. I really do.
Sounds great, man.
We'll do when you come back is we'll talk about the radio show you're setting up and where people can go to find that radio show. And we'll take some questions out of the chat room, and we'll hopefully have some callers. Right now, the weird thing is, we promoted this like literally 12 hours ago, so we didn't really have a whole lot of exposure. But if you got people in your chat room that can call in, I'm going to do the same thing with the other 2 chat rooms and see if we can get people to call in, take a couple of questions. But first, I want you guys to lay the foundation as to exactly what it means when you have a magnetopause reversal. Explain to them the sun face fronting the dark side and how the magnetopause is usually a teardrop. And go into that stuff, because I think that what you're talking about, even though I know from my group that when I say common, I mean within a solar maximum, which we're not in right now, we shouldn't be seeing this kind of event. And it has happened. Last time was 33 years ago. So I'm glad you're going to look back into that and see that it has happened. But we believe it is still, even when you go back and look at that, it's still all connected exactly to the same things that we're talking about right now with Keith and these events that are secular, that are happening right now. So it's amazing that you guys did that research and put that radio show out.
Yeah, I think we struck a nerve with you too, Causic, because I could hear the excitement in your voice. When we start putting this stuff out like that, everything's starting to make sense now to all of our groups.
Right. Well, and I think things will become more and more clear. As time goes on, the question is, what I'm saying is everybody's going to figure this out. There's nobody, even Ozzy and Harriet, with your finger on the pulse, you're going to figure it out quicker. And so I really wanted to put this out there. I wish we could have had Billy in here, and we will next week. We'll have Billy in here where we can bridge the music of the spheres with the man-made technology, and he can clear up some of these areas because he has a lot of information that the general public just can't give you, or you're not going to find in even the scientific community because no one's telling you about it.
The puzzle's coming together with all the pieces, man. Keith's got it, you guys got it, we got it. It's all coming together.
Right.
It's starting to
like-minded people always come together, don't they?
It's starting to produce a picture.
Actually, my best wishes. I'm not familiar with his work at all, but I understand that he's been having some problems lately, and just as a fellow researcher, extend my best wishes to him.
Billy spent since 1966 for about 40 years. He spent doing HAARP. He was as an engineer. He went around and actually installed the HAARP locations, 244 or so around the world. His father had a higher than top secret clearance. They took him and his entire family, which included Billy, and all of their community, literally the entire community, which included a whole bunch of other people Billy's age and their wives and families and that kind of thing, and they isolated them from the general population for 2/3 of Billy's life. He never got involved. He never even talked to the general population, just those people. You see, while he was doing this very secretive program with HAARP. So he's
I
got
got a question. Early at the very beginning of the show, he was talking about, I think it was the Pine View installation. Is that the new installation that we're seeing go up in Australia?
That's Pine Gap is the one I mentioned. It were built around about 1966.
Isn't that the hub for HAARP?
What is the new one that we see on Google Earth? You can see them starting to build it in Australia.
I'm not sure about another one in Australia. I know that there's an NSA one being planned somewhere in the United States.
What's the
As a signals intelligence. I've been doing an evaluation of that. It's very intriguing stuff because it's tied into this Pine Gap and the Menwith Hill site.
What's the name of the hub in the UK?
Go ahead.
What's the hub? What's the name of the hub in the UK for HAARP? That's their main hub over there.
I've done my HAARP, but this Menwith Hill site is the signals intelligence one.
Okay, it could be around that area because the UK is the main hub for HAARP over there, with all their nodes, with all their other nodes all over the world.
There is some news on the internet about it if you look around, Keith, but it does seem that they are building one massive new HAARP installation in Australia, southern Australia.
I'll have to have a look at that then.
All right, we got 30 seconds. What we're going to do is go in and talk about just specifically what the reversal is, what you think it is, and explain to the people the basic mechanics so that the average person that's listening can understand what that is. That's what we'll do first, and then we'll...
Right. I'll use the umbrella on the beach with the wind and being pelleted analogy. That's the best way I know to explain it.
All right, muting for the intro.
And then I'll let Tim simplify that.
Sorry, yeah, we got 2 minutes. It's okay.
Okay.
Oh, we got 2 minutes. Sorry, I thought we had 30 seconds.
Basically, I like to lay it out, for the simple person to understand, what that means and the possibility that we were defenseless. And then I'll let whoever wants to take that and simplify and run with that, I'll just stand by and if needed.
I'm trying to do this with like an interview, like a radio show, in opposed to just a chat room talk. So I'm trying to stick to that question, and then when that question's done, we'll ask another question. We'll just walk right through it because I'm right on your page with this. So.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, in terms of an analogy, you could have like a fast-flowing river with a rock in the middle and the water going curved around, and then it stop it as if the current stops and going backwards.
Yeah, I like that
analogy. Exactly, yeah.
That's exactly what I put
up. I'm not going to steal your analogy. I'll use my analogy. And
I think you best deal with that because it's not a topic I know too much about.
Guys,
so I think
guys, you guys are wasting this stuff for the break. Let's put it on the radio show.
Oh, we are. We're just kind of comparing notes. But
I know what happens is you say it once, and then when you get on the show live again, you don't say it again. You know what I mean?
Oh, we will.
We got 30 seconds.
We will, believe me, we will.
All right, KISS 98.5, the #1 hit radio show. Tune it in, then rip the dial off. We're live with Keith Hunter, Tim Paul, and Relic. We're caught at the crossroads. That's just a joke. Go ahead.
Okay, just mute for a sec. I was just here at the end of it. There we go. I'll join us.
Across the field, tolling on the iron bell, calls the faithful to their knees. Hear the softly spoken magic spell.
All right, we're back. Caught at the crossroads. This is Causic. I've got Keith Hunter, TimothyPaul, and Relic. And we've been talking about Music of the Spheres with Keith Hunter. He's got a website. He's got a book out there. He's published. You can go to his website. It's in the chat room, and we'll tell you where to go to get that at the end of the show as well. We've been talking about Magnetopause reversal, a recent event that took place, a solar event that took place just a couple of days ago. We're looking at that as being a very significant event tied into and as well with this recent theory that people have been putting out about this 188-day cycle with people like John Moore and Lucas and Terrell 03. And we're talking with TimothyPaul and Relic. They had a radio show just a couple of days ago, and they went to great depth talking about this solar event coined the Magnetopause reversal by Suspicious Observer off YouTube. And they've done a lot of research. Keith and I went into their radio show, and we were very impressed with their research. And so, guys, tell me, whoever wants to chime in here, Tim or Relic, what exactly is a magnetopause reversal?
Good, Relic.
Okay, well, let me say first that, and I said this in our show yesterday, we're using that for lack of a better term, but I hate using the word reversal because it implies a pole shift. A magnetic pole shift, and that's not what happened here. This was, okay, I'm going to use the analogy of of being on the beach with high winds. And I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, and you're getting pelted with sand, and it stings. So say you have an umbrella, okay? Now compare that to the solar wind during a solar storm. And you are the Earth, and the magnetopause, or our shield, is your umbrella. And so you've got this wind coming at you and particles from the sun coming at you, and you are shielding yourself with that umbrella. Now, imagine a hurricane force wind coming from directly behind, and what do you have to do? It's like, okay, which side do I protect myself from? Suddenly, you have to turn around 180 degrees and protect yourself from the stronger force coming from the other direction. Well, then, you're still getting pelted from behind from the sun. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we saw. We saw the shield trying to protect us on one side from an unknown force, which we are still trying to research. And then it flips, and it's like, okay, I have to protect Earth from this side. No, I'm getting hit from the back side. So it does this flipping motion for a while. The amazing thing is that after 15, 20, 30 minutes of this arm wrestle between two opposing forces, the sun being on one side and this unknown force being on the other side won and pushed the solar wind back. And we had a reverse flow of highly dense electrons and some other wind, or for the lack of a better term, other than the solar wind, made our sun look like the losing champ. And it did this for 28 hours.
28 hours. So what you're saying, if I can get this straight from what you just said, which is a good analogy, is basically that there's a shield that the Earth has that's facing the sun. And what happens is, mute your mic, really. What happens is we have this shield. It's like a teardrop facing the sun, hits the Earth, and then goes out and creates this big, long tail on the backside. And something happened there at that tail out in the Leo constellation, because that's where we're at right now. And it pushed that tail, shoved it right back towards the sun, and overtook the influence of the sun. Is that what you're saying?
I would just like to say that we don't know where it came from. You say the Leo constellation, that's an arbitrary term. We don't know where it came from. So we're
looking at the precession right now. If you look at the precession of the equinoxes, Earth is in front of the sun's behind us, and what's in front of us is the Leo constellation. That's the precession of the equinoxes. That's when you look at what constellation is out there from the sun when the sun comes up. That's what constellation is out there.
Right.
That's all.
Can I interject just for 1 second?
Go ahead, look.
We can't pin this down yet, like Timothy said, but we will tell you that what we know after 2.5 weeks of research is our main suspect is out near the constellation Hercules, to the upper left of Virgo, which is, in cosmic terms, it's fairly close to where Saturn will be in opposition on April 15th. So
that's very interesting, because you're also talking about recently with the precession of the equinoxes that they've added, or that there's a reason to believe that Ophiuchus is that how you pronounce it? I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but they're saying that there's a constellation that was removed to condense the precession, so that we really don't know exactly what we're looking at out there as far as the precession of the equinox is concerned. So you think that what do you think's out there? I mean, have you guys looked into that? I mean, what's causing this massive amount of struggle between our sun and this other thing? Do you know what it is, or
I can chime in on? There's a key word you just used, Causic. I think they pronounce it something like Ophiuchus, something on that order.
Yeah, right. Ophiuchus or Ophiuchus or something like that, right?
Right. I think everybody needs to keep that term in their head, because it pertains to Mayan talk too. So just keep that in your back of your mind while we're going with this. What we're doing.
So what do you guys think? Do you think what is there something out there? I know Keith and I have talked a great deal about this in the past, but what do you think is causing this magnetopause reversal that actually overtook and won, like you said, a tug of war with our sun, which is right there, 2 million miles away, 1 AU from us, and so something that is way out there could actually overtake the power of our sun.
Yeah, let me explain what we're doing right here now. We're looking for bookmarks, benchmarks out there in space. We're trying to set up vectors between the sun, the Earth, and whatever direction this came from. So we're vectoring this. We're drawing lines out to somewhere out there in the cosmos. So we're getting a good idea of where approximately this flow came from. And
well, Keith, do you have an idea when you're looking at these alignments, conjunctions, when you're looking at the music of the spheres? Do you have some kind of idea? Have you looked at that in conjunction with what, or in to what your research has done? Do you have any kind of an idea as to what you think it might be?
Well, I'm just throw in a few things, because what you were just saying there, Tim, makes perfect sense to know what the kind of vector is. But I would say this. If we can consider this to be the sun is, quote, normal, doing its thing, and then another object outside of the Earth has an effect which, as you say, does a tug-of-war with the sun. But it could be that there is no external object as such,
right,
in any blatant way or basic way. But maybe the sun itself, if you can imagine it blowing its solar wind, maybe some process involved with the sun caused it to do a sucking motion which caused the reversal. In other words, it's the sun purely doing something, in which case it would have affected all of the planets. And I just put this as a research point because you're trying to find a vector. If you find that this is an exact 180-degree reversal for this thing, I'd suspect it's the sun that's done something. If it's at an offset, at an angle, then I'd say, yeah, it could be an external object, so to speak. I think that's just a basic way I'd look at it, at least. I'd focus mainly upon the sun, though, above all of the factors.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why we're trying to pinpoint a vector here to the deepest parts of space where this object, this energy flow came from. And back to Relic's theory using the umbrella there, that flow was just beyond comprehension. You can equate what he was talking about with that wind coming, say, off the ocean or whatever like that. You have your umbrella on the beach, and all of a sudden you get this hurricane force wind coming from 180-degree opposite direction. It was just an incredible amount of power that we saw set up between the sun and whatever else is out there. And we used the analogy on our program, on our show the other day, of thinking of it as a river, kind of reversing course. And we're kind of like a stone in the middle of this river. And what happens... yeah, but what happens... instead of a stone, let me use a beach ball. With the sun's solar winds blowing, we're kind of a beach ball in this river, kind of spinning around in the river, kind of flowing downstream a little bit. When this reversal, for lack of better terms, when it happened, this flow set up with the sun in synchronous energy there, that our beach ball, which is our Earth, actually stood still and was a non-factor. It neutralized our Earth's magnetic shield, our magnetosphere, our magnetopause. What we saw, the magnetopause completely disappeared. And Relic, you might want to talk about the magnetic flux lines, what you saw, the direction of the flux line when this event happened.
That's right, Tim. Let's do this. Let's talk about this magnitude, because you guys are saying this was an overpowering amount of magnitude. Let's talk about some math. Can you give me some math? Give me something that I can a number. What would make what kind of, was it a proton, an electron? What was it?
We don't know what this stream was. Some are calling it protons. Some are calling it electrons. Until we get further data, we don't know what that stream consisted of. We saw an event happen out there, which was concurred with actual scientists that work on the project for that. What's that satellite, Relic? It's Fermi, right?
Fermi.
Right, the Fermi satellite. So it picks up these anomalies out there in space, and we have concurrence with these scientists that they did pick up this cosmic gamma ray blast out there. It was like a double-barrel shotgun event that happened. There was two of them that happened. And
my group, I have 41 lettered scientists in my research group, and we've been doing this research for quite a while. I just want to throw this in there. We believe there is some indication. You go back and look at things like the critical frequency layers, like the F1 layer. We can see that we're not seeing a massive injection from the far side, the backside, away from the sun. we're not seeing a massive proton injection from back there. We're seeing a lot of electrons, though. What's your take on it?
Exactly. Okay. From now, I don't want anybody to take this as truth, but if you want a preliminary suspect, I'm going to give it to you. Using Saturn as a line of sight, and I did this because Saturn will be in direct opposition, meaning that it will be in the direction of space that this would have come from. So I started preliminary research, had me looking in the deep space area that would be directly behind Saturn. Then, after we got in contact with the folks at Fermi who monitor gamma ray bursts, we discovered that I'm talking minutes before the first reversal, there was a gamma ray burst detected in the constellation Hercules. Anybody can look this up. It was gamma ray burst. It's labeled GRB 2012-0312A. It occurred at 1607 UTC, just minutes before the first reversal event. Now, what we see is a stream or a flow of electrons with magnetic flux lines, and Tim can tell you it is unheard of to see magnetic lines of flux perfectly parallel, especially in that huge of a region of space, just because of the erratic nature of magnetic fields.
Right.
As a matter of fact, one of our researchers, we were trying to gather data, and Delta had his data already up on YouTube, and I'm like, how'd you get it up so fast? And Delta said, well, there was about 12 hours of data that was the same image, so I just skipped over it. Well, I went back and got that data to make sure it wasn't still images, and it wasn't. We thought that everything had stopped, and there was no data coming in, but it was very slight variations. The satellites were still going around. It was still picking up magnetic lines of flux within the magnetosphere.
Exactly. It was like nothing ever happened on Earth.
But outside, we've only seen perfect parallel lines of magnetism and a current flow like that in one thing on Earth, and that is a copper wire with current flow going through it.
Right, any kind of conduit, copper or any kind of a conductor like that. When Relic and I first saw this event happen, we both kind of looked at each other and goes, that's current.
That's right. You guys are talking about electrons. You're talking about current running through copper wire.
Exactly.
It sounds a lot to me like electric universe. It sounds like a derivative of plasma cosmology, which seems to be in direct confluence of the conventional mainstream, which is what Newtonian cosmology. Have you guys looked into plasma cosmology at all, or are you using that theory, or are you just looking at these numbers and trying to figure it out from there?
We're taking plasma into account, but what we saw was just simple, basic electricity theory. We looked at this and we're going, my God, this is just standard, ordinary current flow through a conductor. But look at the magnitude of it. Look at how perfect and parallel lines of electrons or whatever this was. Look at how they're flowing. I said, outside the Relic, I said, look, man, this is just simple electrical circuit setting up here between the sun and whatever else is out there, where it's coming from.
And another thing that jumped out at me and Tim both was there's a law in basic electromagnetism called the left thumb rule. And the magnetic flux lines continued to go in a very specific direction, and they changed direction, and they followed what's called the left thumb rule of electromagnetism. That tells me two things: that this was some sort of conduit, it was electron flow like through a conductor, and the data must have been good because the laws of electromagnetism were obeyed.
Exactly.
But what the amazing thing is guess what was received? Guess what the receiving end of all this current flow was? The sun.
Exactly. And we're thinking something was astray with the sun at this point. That's where my other theory came into effect with that great big coronal hole on the sun.
And another thing that's amazing is you had that huge equilateral, or I forget the exact term, but the equal side triangle shaped coronal hole.
Isosceles,
Yeah, isosceles triangle shaped coronal hole, and that would have been what was receiving. It was, it was aimed at Earth, and it was also pointed in the exact direction of this reverse electron flow.
Right.
Now, you guys know that when you see something face fronting like a coronal hole, especially something as large as that, just because it's face fronting, when you're looking at that satellite, which is face fronting, of course, it has to hit that satellite first, that it'll take at least a day or maybe 2, sometimes even 3, before that solar wind actually will hit the Earth, though. So now, at that time, now when was that that triangular coronal hole, the trans-equatorial coronal hole? Was it 2 days or 3 days later? I can't remember. But the solar stream, because when you look at the sun, if you look at the diagrams, you'll see that the coronal hole, even when it's face fronting, it's not coming straight at us. It's more like, because we're moving at 66 plus, or 67,000 miles an hour, and the whole solar system is moving through the galaxy. It's more like a pinwheel. That solar stream comes out of that coronal hole and arcs. It arcs around, like from, say, if the sun was in the middle of the clock, it would shoot out and it would kind of bend all the way over to like around 7 or even 8 o'clock. And then, like a pinwheel, it would wave across us. So a lot of that solar wind would hit us glancing, and then much of it would hit us from behind. Also, we also have 2 CMEs. One was face fronting, that was moving very complex and slow, and the second one was glancing, and it was moving very fast.
Right.
It caught up with the first one at the exact same time that solar wind did. That hit us. Have you guys looked into that as well?
Yeah, we've been looking at that, but let me say something about that coronal hole. We've been watching coronal holes for a long time. Most of the time, they're just kind of like a sporadic shape to them. There's no real shape to them at all. This one particular coronal hole was sort of like that. It was growing and growing when it started coming around. What do you call it? I'm not a space junkie here, but the limb of the sun or whatever. And the more
came across the eastern limb of the sun, right?
Right. The more we looked at this thing, the more it started taking on a shape. And I just look at things like that as shapes, just like the Mayans probably would have looked at things as shapes, because they played a significant role in the whole scheme of things. So when this thing came around, I'm looking at this, talking to Relic, going, Relic, look at this thing, man. This has got some kind of significance to it. It's starting to look like a triangle. And
well, it was a triangle, but it wasn't just one triangle. It was actually 2 triangles. There was one, and this is pretty significant if you're going to talk about what the ancients thought about. Face fronting, it was one triangle, but as it moved to the western limb, if you look up at about between 1 and 2 o'clock, you'll see that 2 triangles developed. The first one from the top of the imperial hierarchy there, that triangle that started there. The second one developed, and it was a perfect triangle as well.
I didn't see the second one. I was so excited about all the other data that was coming coming in. I was. It goes back to what the ancients talk about with the third eye, when they talk about we were on am I mispronouncing his name? But Lewis. We were on Lewis's radio show. It's called Ground Zero a couple days ago, and he was talking about this in great detail. That the symbolism that goes on, ancient history, exactly.
The wisdom that they had. They said, look, we're going to see signs like this on the sun, especially from our sun. We'll look up and we'll see these things, like we'll see this triangle, and a second triangle is where that eye, of the unknown God, comes into play. That has to do with that whole thing we talked about earlier with Keith Hunter and the anthropomorphized allegories, things that go on in space, and then we give them names like the gods and that kind of thing. So we've seen that kind of thing happen. What do you think, Relic? Is that something you've looked at as well?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Tim brought this up, and that's something else that we want to look into more. That makes you wonder. Throughout histories, going, as far archaeologically speaking, as far back as you can look, every culture with oceans in between, every continent, with no way of communicating with each other, unless they had some sort of help, what structure do you see repeated over every civilization? The pyramid, an isosceles triangle. Why? There is some significance to that.
Right. Every pyramid is not an exact isosceles triangle, too. I just want to put that out there, because most that studied the pyramids and stuff like that know that, but all the mathematics in a triangle, they work perfectly amongst all triangle shapes. So what we saw when that came around, our theory is that the sun, with that triangle shape, relating to all the past, the Sumerians and Mayans and everybody else, when that sun came around and exposed that triangle, to us, that was a message telling something out there that it needed help. And when that come around, it created this resonance that Keith was talking about. A resonance with something out there in deep, deep space saying, look, I need to be recharged or something like this. And all of a sudden, that massive energy conduit set up, and that's what we're examining right now. It's an incredible, incredible find. We might be way off base, but all the pieces are coming together with this. Go ahead, Relly.
Keith, Tim. Once again, you're phasing in and out. So it's almost like digital warble. Like where it's not lag or anything like that. You're not cutting in and out. You just like it's like three of your voices at the same time, and you get really, really dim. I don't know if you got something running in the background or not, but I don't know if we're going to run over on this. This is a very, very important topic. We got 5 minutes left in the show. I don't know if we're going to be able to move over or go on any longer. I'm waiting to find out right now from the owner of the station. Okay, he says we can move on a little longer. Good, which is good because if you guys want to stick around, Keith, you want to stick around? Tim, Relic?
Yeah, I can stick around. Yeah,
sure.
I'll stick around and chime in if needed. Like I said, we're pretty wore out from all this research, but if we need to interject, we will stand by. I will.
I'd like to get
absolutely.
back. Absolutely.
What I want to tell you right now is that you are on Caught at the Crossroads with Keith Hunter, Timothy Paul, and Relic. I'm Causic. We're on NewRevRadio, and if you want to call in at NewRevRadio on Skype. It's a free phone call, just download Skype, and then just add to your contacts NewRevRadio Studio. And you can call in for free. You can call in the regular phone number. It's 323-319-6470. That's 323-319-6470. Call at the Crossroads. We're going to take a short break for a couple of minutes, and then we are going to be back here and talk about this magnetopause reversal. It's a major event that's taking place right now. And what's happening is we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know. We do know that this is a significant event. It's coming at the same time that we're seeing this window where other people are talking exactly the same thing about this, like John Moore and Lucas and even Terrell 03 with this 188-day cycle. So we think that there may have been some significant earmarks that took place at this time that might not have been exactly the same thing that happened before. We've got a caller right now. I want to take that call. Caller 289 just dropped, so we lost that caller. We're going to go back to and talk about the magnetopause reversal. We talked just a moment ago about there being a massive amount of electrons that moved in, Relic. And so now, when we seen that, did we see any kind of reverberation? Was there did it hit us enough where we saw any kind of atmospheric compression or any kind of reverberation, anything like that? Have you guys looked into that stuff like that yet?
That's like Tim said. The amazing thing is, during that entire 28 hours, it seemed like Earth was just neutral, and it seemed like we were just null and void. I mean, this thing was just flowing around us with no apparent consequences on Earth. So, I mean, that also makes us just wonder. I know this is going way out on a limb, but this is also, making us wonder, you're dealing with gravitational forces and massive amounts of energy. That being said, was there a time component? I know this is really taking it out there, but, just think out of the box for a second. Is it possible that the reason we had no consequences on here on Earth is because maybe time outside of our little bubble, which is our magnetosphere, came to a crawl while time went on, and we noticed nothing. There was no ground currents. I think we lost one or two. I think the Russians lost a satellite. But other than that, we had no reports of power outages. We had no reports of major ground currents.
There were disruptions in some of the satellites. We did lose a couple up there from what I heard, but there was other disruptions in communication satellites. I got that as an absolute there.
I'd like
we
to see
lose
some of that
satellites.
data.
We saw that. I'll tell you something else. Let me ask you this. So isn't that interesting because you're talking about this major event that actually caused our magnetosphere, our shield, like Star Trek, Captain Kirk, the shields are down. What happened here is the shields got totally reversed. The backside of our our shield, the front side is round, and then it goes back to the backside, and then there's a teardrop. And what you're saying is it took that teardrop and it forced it all the way back and caused the teardrop to be facing the sun. That's a major event without any kind of real consequences here on Earth. No reverberation, no kind of atmospheric compression, no kind of seismic pulse. There was no planetary rhythmic pulse. No indications of anything like that except a couple of satellites. But let me ask you a question.
Not exactly.
Okay.
Okay, now, during the event, if you look at that video that I put out in the chat room, we still had a magnetic field being generated. All of the magnetic field lines were being pulled towards the sun, but there was no interaction between that force that was pushing the sun back, and there was no teardrop at all. There was no sign that we were being protected. So if we took on a charge of current like that, if it didn't go around us, if we were in the middle of that, how were there no consequences? I mean, we're talking about a wave of energy that came not through us, but I mean all around us, probably for hundreds of thousands of miles in space, in all directions. So how were there no consequences?
Can I just throw something in here? I don't know whether this is, because I did look at that video, and from what you're basically saying is, we have got the sun, affecting us from that direction, creating the teardrop, and the magnetic field around us is creating this teardrop pattern because of it. And when you look at the video, it appears that the whole thing is as if the sun has switched off affecting us, so that the field has collapsed into a spherical, undisturbed field around the Earth. Is that what you're essentially saying?
Yes, it was like the field, the magnetic field was there, and you could see that the magnetic field lines being produced by our core were going they were actually being pushed toward the sun, but you're right. There was no interaction between this force and our magnetopause. It's like we were null and void.
So would I be right in thinking then that this field then, it's as if the effect that the sun would have in distorting the magnetic field, right, that's what was switched off, and so that the field would naturally take on a kind of a spheroid shape around the Earth? Because if that's what you're saying, it seems to me then that another object wouldn't necessarily have been in a tug-of-war situation with the sun, but the sun itself has fundamentally done something, and this is why the magnetic field of the Earth still remained.
I can chime in.
It was just
with that too,
undisturbed.
Alex.
Do you know what I mean?
I think what happened is there was a time and space. Something happened between time and space, because what I think and what Relic and I think, what I've talked about, is we should have been absolutely vaporized, gone. With that energy flow, that much energy flow hitting us, we should have been absolutely blown to pieces. But nothing happened. We were in another time and space dimension being protected at this time. That's my belief.
I would have
Space
to
and time.
concur.
Did you say we're blown into a different place in space and time?
No, I believe we was protected at that period of time, because there's a time, really, isn't there a time where we didn't see any time happening there for a second? You mentioned something about that.
Yeah, I mean, it almost appeared like, to me, I mean, if you think of the possible temporal disturbance that could have happened with this, to me it seems like possibly the reason we had no consequences is inside our magnetosphere, time and space went on as normal for whatever reason. But as this flowed around, this pebble in the stream that we are, it seems to me that all of that space beyond our shield, beyond our protection, came to a standstill, or maybe not a standstill, but an absolute crawl. And that would, that would be just one of a million explanations that we could put out there right now as to why there were no consequences.
Have you guys been looking at times when right now there's people out there talking about things like planetary wide or sinuous seismic monitors that are going off around the Earth all at the same time. Do you have any information about when this magnetopause reversal took place? Were there any kind of indication that there was any kind of seismic monitors going off all at exactly the same time?
What we're looking for is something outside of our technical instruments happening. I've been asking people if they've felt strange, if anything's acted weird around them, any kind of time issues, spiritual feelings, anything that's pertaining to anything like that happened, because we're missing time. It's almost like something said, Earth, just chill out for a couple seconds. We got something to do here, and we'll get back with you here. And that's what happened. We were totally.
You know what? I'll tell you what. All throughout the last couple of years, we've been talking about things like the magnetic clock has changed. We've had to adjust our time. We're looking at Chandler wobble. We're looking at aquifers that cause axis shifts that are important. Back in April 2005, we saw the Chandler wobble almost come to a halt for a while. There was a major event that took place there. Things with our sun. We're seeing stuff right now that not just these events that are taking place right now. A lot of things are happening right now. What do you guys think? Are these just natural, normal events that are happening? Because they're telling us, we're in solar cycle 24, and there's people out there right now saying that solar cycle 24, we're not even close.
I think the Mayans were exactly dead on the money.
The Mayans.
Not just the Mayans, but you hear the same story repeated
all over the globe.
Several cultures: Sumerians, the I Ching, the Chinese, the Hopi Indians.
Exactly.
You hear a similar story, and there's a lot of parallels.
What exactly is the story? I mean, what exactly? Can you sum that up for me? Can you tell me what is their story? I mean, just give me in layman's terms. If I was listening to this for the first time, what are the ancients telling us that's happened? Relic.
Basically, we are coming into what they call the sixth age, and it is basically a rebirth of everything. Especially, they call it the rebirth of the sun. They also call it, interestingly enough, the time of no time. What I would suggest, and I'm not trying to promote myself, but I go into this in depth with a message of hope and a new look at the Mayans, and I studied intensely for this. In a documentary that I made on my YouTube channel. It's called The Galactic Day. And there will be a sequel to that coming in light of what happened on March 12th. And it's all related.
Well, you know what? It's okay for you to promote yourself. That's what we're here for. Keith Hunter is published. He's got a book out there. We're going to talk about his website here in a moment. The guy's got his books out there, and you can go to his website. You guys have a website as well. Where you go to, and you can bring people in there. Keith, can you tell us again how to get your book from your website? How do you go about doing that?
Well, if you just go to my website, it's ancientworldmysteries.com. That's dashes between the words, ancient-world-mysteries.com. From there, you can see details of my book, but also lots of good essays on there people can freely look at, and some of the basic proofs about how our system of measures has an energetic physics behind it, and of how there are proofs that the Earth did once have 360 days per year and so forth. And you can also find a link on my website to my YouTube channel where I do some other presentations. And regarding the issue of the Mayans and the Aztecs, and I've done quite a few presentations on that, and their general knowledge and wisdom, if you like, or their traditions that have been carried on, basically they believe that every once in a while, on a long-range cycle, every several millennia or so, there will be massive geophysical activity for the Earth as a whole, and also that there will be exotic phenomena occur with respect to the Sun and other planets, right? And these are sudden changes. They occur quite rapidly, and they occur when we reach these end-of-age scenarios. This is not just pure mythology. This is high physics behind these events. They are very real. The physics is exacting. And when we talk about, for example, some of the ancient cultures talk about the sun going dark. Well, the sun's light waves, right, peaks and troughs, you can cancel out sound, you can cancel out light waves. If the sun's waves return back onto themselves, the sun would, as a visible emitter, literally switch off as a light source. And if you look at certain ancient texts, such as the Gnostic text from the 3rd century AD called the Pistis Sophia, in one of the dialogues where Jesus speaks about it, he actually says exactly that. And they refer to it as the dragon of the outer darkness entering into our world. And when that happens, it causes the light of the sun to be cancelled out temporarily, because the sun's waves return back onto themselves. So the peaks and troughs all just go exactly perfectly in a phase to cancel out to zero, which cancels out the light or cancel out sound waves. And this is what they talk about. And you can look at other ancient texts. They seem to tie in the resonant patterns of these major conjunctions. On the one hand, give us massive destabilization and earthquakes, and at the same time, the same light wave patterns constrain the light waves of the sun and cause the sun to temporarily switch off as a visible emitter of light. And this is what the Mayan ceremonies were about. They had the Aztecs, Central America, the Yucatan Peninsula and just into Mexico, that region. If you looked at the Aztec calendar, every 52 years they were doing this tradition where they had a ritual sacrifice. It was called the New Fire Ceremony. And they extinguished all the fires throughout their land, and they ritually sacrificed somebody on a precise conjunction pattern. And they ripped out his heart, and they started a new fire in his chest cavity. This was the new fire, and everybody lit their torches from this new fire because the light of the world had gone dark, and this new fire rekindled the fire and the light of the sun. And what the Aztecs did, they conducted this ceremony where they had this ritual sacrifice take place on a precise conjunction of the Earth with the Pleiades constellation at the highest point in the sky on the meridian at midnight. So that's why the sun would be 180 degrees around the other side. So that's the conjunction. And they thought that if the Pleiades failed to cross over the meridian at midnight after doing this sacrifice, that the sun would go dark. And they would be completely blank. The world would go into a state of agitation. The world would end. And this is why they did this tradition with their calendar systems, right? And it's the same thing. Their calendar ceremony would have been created because at some point in the distant past, this event occurred. And they were thinking that a sacrifice is necessary to, quote, appease the gods and prevent the next disaster. And they kept doing one every 52 years up until the Europeans arrived, right, in the late 15th century, because obviously the Spanish arriving first, they thought that this ceremony was of the devil, so they kind of banned it, right? So they tried to influence them and destroy their own native traditions by putting the Roman Catholic religion and forcing that on them. But the key point, as I say, is that their traditions spoke of massive geophysical activity and exotic effects to do with the sun and even the planet Venus especially, and that these things were tied into special conjunction patterns which gave us these end-of-age scenarios. And this is essentially what all these traditions are about. And it's not just mythological mumbo-jumbo. There was a high physics behind it and a high knowledge. And I think to an extent, I would literally say, modern military forces and some of the covert organizations around have reconstructed some of this science, and they're aware of some of the processes involved in how the planets can trigger earthquakes and so forth in subtle patterns. But they would also, I'm sure, be aware that if we had these accurate conjunctions, then we could have massive global changes. And we need only look at some of the geopolitical things going off right now, with bunkers being built underground, preparations being made by various governments, like the federal government in the United States buying all the freeze-dried food. There seems to be some kind of knowledge out there, a heightened sense of urgency amongst the powers that be, that something big is on the way and is going to hit us in our immediate future, if you know what I'm saying.
That's right, Keith. You know what? I've done over the last 8 months somewhere in the range of about 140 radio shows. We've talked in great depth about many of the things that you just pointed out right there. And I'll tell you this, when you're looking at the ancient, history, the ancient wisdom, and you're looking at some of those societies and some of the information that they're throwing out there, that we're talking about things like this event that Relic and TimothyPaul are talking about, where, if this would have gone even further, it could have hit our sun and possibly even moved or shredded the corona, which is the atmosphere of the sun, to the point where you would have not just seen just one, what looked like a very large, trans-equatorial coronal hole, that pyramid that was there, but maybe the entire sun could have turned into a large coronal hole facing the Earth. Now, you mentioned a moment ago about the luminosity of the sun and then that kind of thing. Well, listen, if you have a coronal hole that takes up the entire face-fronting solar disk, from if you're sitting here on Earth looking at the sun, you would see something like sackcloth. You would see the sun turn to sackcloth, or even possibly, because we're looking at 27 days of rotation, you would see 3 days of darkness here on the Earth. And all throughout ancient, history, they've talked about this 3 days of darkness. So maybe we don't even need to have an object come between the Earth and the sun, like we think in the ways of, eclipses, to have this 3 days of darkness. It's really good.
If I might just clear that point up, definitely. This has nothing to do with an eclipse when we talk about days of darkness. Absolutely nothing. This is a very exotic effect to the sun, which temporarily causes the sun to switch off as a visible emitter of light by its light waves being cancelled. The 3 days of darkness is actually from the Osiris-Horus mythology. What happens is, and again, it's a brilliant little story. Osiris has got a brother, an evil brother, Seth, I think if I've got it right, and he plots his downfall as Seth. So what he does is he organises a big banquet, and he invites 72 conspirators to come there, and he builds this wonderful little coffin type thing. And he says to everybody, everybody try to fit in this coffin, and basically he's worked out secretly the dimensions of Osiris, and so he's built this coffin perfectly to fit his dimensions. So everybody tries fitting into it, and nobody fits in but Osiris. And the minute he fits perfectly into it, he quickly nail it shut and throw him in some river. Now 72 is a measure of hours. And if you divide that by 3, well, it's 3 days. It's because it's 24 hours you get. And so this is the mythology of him being, killed in this way. And you can even relate 72 to myths involving the moon losing its light and so forth. But you may also be familiar with the story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. Again, Ali Baba's got a brother, Qasim, and he gives him this secret magic word to enter this cave where 40 thieves have hidden all the treasure. And he also gives him a secret word to get out again. So when Qasim goes into this cave, he's so in awe of the treasure that he can't remember what the secret word is to get out. So the 40 thieves come back and they chop him up. They dismember him. And again, he ends up being put back together again for his funeral rite. And this is one of the things that happens also with Osiris. He ends up getting mutilated and chopped up into bits and pieces, and Isis has to reassemble him. So these are all like units of time. 40 hours is, what you get from the 40 thieves. It's a unit of time. And again, you even look at the myth of Phaeton, and some of the stories about there. The king hides in a cave and his son takes over as a successor for 1 day, 1 24-hour period. But he can't control the chariot of light, and so Zeus destroys the chariot. And so what happens is Phaeton's father, who is the sun god, goes into a state of grief and veils his light from the world. So the sun goes dark from grief. And you can also see there that there are all these little stories, all subtle variations in different cultures, which talk about a succession or a reign between a father and a son. And he gives the crown of light to his son for the day, and he himself, he cannot control the light. So his reign fails and he gets killed and dismembered. And then the true king, his father, goes back onto the throne again. And if you look at one of the Babylonian myths, again, they have a New Year ceremony in Babylon where they let loose a chariot of 4 horses dragging some like mock image of Phaeton, right? You know, that they've just tied to it. And again, they actually state that this is to symbolize the demise, the chaotic state of the world during the demise of the crown. And it's a very interesting thing when you think about crown, because it's like I said before, what is that halo effect around the moon when we have the conjunction? The corona. Corona is crown. And when in the Phaeton myth, you have Jupiter aligned to another body between Jupiter and the sun. So the sun crowns Phaeton. The very word Phaeton means chariot. And the Russians themselves, even modern Russians will tell you that they think that planet that was the asteroid belt, they call it Phaeton. I think that would on Russia today. So, these are all these connections in mythology are pointing towards stories of celestial events which were real, right? They had a real exotic effect. And you can even bring in, let's say, the Bible, because in the story of Phaeton goes to his father, who is the sun god. He goes to his palace. And when he gets into his palace, he sees the sun robed in purple, sat on his throne, with all these emeralds present around, rainbow colours. And he's got right to his left and to his right, the hours, the days, and the seasons all ranged and stood at equal intervals in his palace. If you check out Revelation in the Bible, in the vision of John, he is shown this amazing room. And what does he see? He sees the sun, or rather he sees God. It's referenced as God, but it's actually the sun. He's sat on a throne, emeralds are mentioned, and there are 24 elders around him. 24 elders at 24 hours, because a special day has arrived, and they're going to have massive geophysical activity. The very story in Revelation, at that point right there, of the vision of John, is exactly identical to the Phaeton story that you get, which is the best explanation or the best review of it is in Ovid's Metamorphoses. And Ovid was around 1st century AD stroke BC. And so all of these myths that you have here, there's a physics behind them, and they're talking about real exotic effects. You may have seen Botticelli's famous painting, The Birth of Venus, and Venus as a morning star. If you look to some of the work of Bernardino Sahagún, he was one of the early priests that went with the Spanish in the 16th century, when they first went over to see the Aztecs and the Mayan cultures, and before they totally wiped out their cultures, they actually wrote down all their traditions, and they spoke about Venus as a star having some exotic effect and strange light coming from it, and everybody was hiding indoors because they thought it would give them, some kind of sickness if they felt it. And so all of these statements about Venus as the morning star, brightest star in the sky, it's some sort of energetic flare-up event to do with its field. And we would imagine that it's being caught up in a conjunction with the Earth. We can look at, there's even the story, for example, of an illicit affair between Ares and Aphrodite. And the sun is a witness to their affair. The sun sees them meet in passionate embrace. Well, the sun is the center of the solar system. Aphrodite is Venus. Ares is Mars. What the sun sees as a passionate embrace is a conjunction of Venus and Mars.
Can I ask something, Keith?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's very relevant. We just had the conjunction with, how does Jupiter play into this? Because Venus and Jupiter have just conjuncted a few days ago and were the brightest objects in the sky.
Yes, I looked at that in Starry Night. I looked at the mapping, especially on the 12th, one of the dates you were looking at. I think it was about 3 degrees off, something like that. They were close. Again, the way in which these conjunctions have their effect, though, in order to have a true conjunction, it's got to be like of a transit level. It's got to be exceptionally accurate. If they're very close to one another, the significance is in there may be an arc length of separation which maps onto the planet which they are conjuncting with at one end, so to speak. And if that arc length is of energetic significance, it can fit in, so the dimensions, say, of the target body, this is where we get these resonant fits, and this is where you get these subtle earthquakes and energetic effects. So I think that you can get entire planets go into flare-up type events, and this is why I'm looking at this magnetic, the pausing field and so forth. I'm thinking maybe there's a very subtle, it couldn't have been an obvious conjunction, but maybe some sort of subtle configuration that triggered that reversal. But I'm kind of tempted to think the target body would be the sun that we need to look at. And I'm just kind of wondering whether or not, and again, I'm just as a passing thing, because I'd only heard about this recently, whether or not there's any information from the NASA satellites, like the Stereos or the SOHO satellite, going, looking at the sun itself. Did it do anything unusual at the same time as the Magnetopause as viewed in the video?
What we did was we talked about it a few times. We were on Clyde Lewis's show. His show is a corporate show. We had 600,000 listeners. We were there for 3 hours. We talked about this on his show, Ground Zero, that there was this giant trans-equatorial coronal hole that Timothy Paul alluded to just a minute ago, a little while ago, about it looking like a pyramid, when in fact it was actually two pyramids as it was moving across to the western limb. And they draw the same kind of conclusions on that show as that you're drawing right now about the ancients and their information about what we talk about with the sun turning into sackcloth, or you're talking about the illumination of the sun being diminished tenfold or so, where we cause this massive coronal hole face fronting the Earth, that there is no atmosphere. Now, let me tell you something else. That tells us a little bit about what's happening, not only with the Bible and biblical prophecy, but also all throughout ancient history. They mimicked the exact same and talked about the exact same types of events. But let me tell you something else. Let me just take a minute and go into what would happen if we saw a coronal hole that was so large that it took away the entire solar disk face fronting. What happens without that atmosphere is we get a solar stream, a complexion of solar stream that hits us, and most of that is considered plasma. Now, we have various layers that we keep track of and we measure in our atmosphere. That starts out in our magnetosphere, and then we make our way into the stratosphere. Now, we've seen, and suspicious observers have been keeping their finger on this pulse as well on YouTube, and go there and check his YouTube website out. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing a layer, one particular layer that we're focusing on there is that the F1 layer of our atmosphere, that's called the critical frequency layer, the F1 layer. Predictable models have shown that this cycle, solar cycle 24, at this time of year, we should see very little or no plasma injectant whatsoever coming through that layer. Yet today, when you look at the real-time models, we're actually seeing somewhere between 8 and 14. So we're way, way above. Now, historically, you go back between solar cycle 24, 23, 22, and so forth, all throughout the last 4, 5, 6, 7 cycles, we're way, way above where we should be. Now, let me tell you what this means to the average person. We're seeing plasma injecting blow right through our magnetosphere, right through our upper atmosphere and down into our stratosphere. Recently, NASA threw out a project where they put up 8 rockets into the upper lower atmosphere. They put out elements that as soon as those elements touch air, they ignite like plasma, and then they watched it or where they're trying to. I'm not sure actually if that actually happened or not, but they've been trying to. And what happens is they were measuring how much of that plasma was making it down into the vapor clouds, our weather patterns. If this plasma from the sun caused by this giant coronal hole was to make it down into our weather patterns, into our vapor clouds, let me tell you, folks, in layman's terms, here's what you would have. You would have weather systems that instead of them being vapor clouds, they would be plasma clouds that were, if those plasma clouds became charged, what you'd have is fire in the sky, and that's a biblical thing, and all the ancient texts have talked about this fire from the sky. We would have, instead of water, we would have fire from the sky. Listen, folks, we have only got, we're over time right now. I want to thank Keith Hunter for coming into the show today. We're going to put up his links here in the chat room, and TimothyPaul and Relic also, they have their own show. And once again, I want TimothyPaul and Relic to tell us, how do we get to your research group that you have to talk about this? For all the people that want to go back and get more information about what you're talking about, how do we get there? One of you guys want to tell us?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, Causic, thanks for inviting us over, man. This has been absolutely enlightening. Go ahead, Relic.
Well, absolutely. You know what? I'll tell you what. After Keith and I came over and was listening to your commentary, you guys on that radio show, I said to myself, you know what? We had a secret guest that couldn't make it today, and I said the first person I thought about was TimothyPaul and Relic, and there was another guy on that show there too. I only know him as Mike, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to bring these guys in here. And Keith agreed, and so that's why we have you here, because of that show, and you got all the research that you're doing on this Magnetopause reversal thing. I really appreciate it. How do we get to your website, you guys?
We have two domains that take you to the same site. It's planetxresearch, all one word, .com or planetxresearch.org. There are clickable links that'll take you to the Paltalk, the group page. If you download Paltalk, or if you go on Paltalk Express, look under the category Education, Other, and then the name of the room is Truth Seekers Research. And I wanted to plug one thing to everybody listening.
Okay, go ahead. We're 5 minutes past our time. There's another host waiting to come in. So go ahead, Relic. What do you have to say? This out.
My final word to everybody listening: you are all you don't realize how extremely important every one of you out there are. Anything that you think might be relevant, the smallest little bit of information could open up an entire new door to this investigation.
Exactly.
So I'm asking all researchers to stand up. We accept every point of view, even opposing points of view. If our room is not available, I encourage you to make your own room. It does not matter. We need to all bring all of this information together and compare notes.
That's right. You know what? And I'll tell you something. There are thousands and thousands of listeners listening, not only here on this show, but also the affiliate shows. You guys did a great job tonight. Thank you, Tim Paul. Thank you, Rella, for showing up. Keith, tell us one more time just how to get to your place, because I think your book